Chapter 2102. The old pattern of playing a hero to rescue the beauty. Ling Han chuckled. This person's hypocrisy really could not be more obvious. He did not care though. In any case, he had already decided to make things difficult for this guy, so he could put on a fake act as much as he liked. They exited the forest, and began heading towards the rock heaven. Lu Herong did not appear, because Hunyeo had already used a secret technique to communicate with her, and said that their group would be heading directly to the rock heaven later, so there was no need for her to worry. Originally, it was impossible for Lu Herong to agree, but she suspected that a traitor had appeared within the rock palace, and she, as a celestial king, was instead a bigger target. If Hunyeo went with Ling Han on one path, and Lu Herong went on another path, the latter would definitely be able to draw away an extremely large amount of the Four Seas Palace's attention. Paving the path for Hunyeo's return to the rock palace, Ling Han was the heir of that lord, so she still had considerable trust in Ling Han's ability to ensure their safety. And precisely because of this, Lu Herong did not appear again, but instead followed them from the shadows. When they were about to reach the rock heaven, she would leave alone to draw away the attention of the Four Seas Palace. There was no need to rush their journey to the rock heaven. Instead, there was a transference portal that crossed heavens which could save a great amount of time. There were not many such transference portals that crossed heavenly realms, because only ninth heaven celestial kings that were versed in the regulations of space could set them up, and there were not many such beings in the entire celestial realm. The rock heaven was named after the rock palace, which showed how prosperous and powerful the rock palace had once been, that they had been able to occupy the territory of a whole heavenly realm. Unfortunately, the source beast, the rock, had long since disappeared in the passage of history, and the last imperial empress of the rock palace had died in an ambush, and they were presently undergoing trial and hardship. Perhaps the rock heaven would be changing its name after a few more epochs. On the journey, Yang Xiao continued to show off, relating the history of every place they went. He did have skill at this, being able to tell a story in a pleasant and captivating manner, and fascinating his listeners, and Chen Shuangshuang would continuously nod at this. Ling Han saw all this happen, and thought that if he did not hurry up and deal with Yang Xiao, his daughter-in-law would be gone. Thankfully, Chen Shuangshuang was not just insensitive towards Ling Zhenxue alone, but was the same towards everyone. Seeing Yang Xiao to curry favor with her so obviously, anyone with the slightest bit of intelligence should have been able to distinguish his intentions, but she only laughed and chuckled cheerily, being astonishingly insensitive. True, if it could have been settled with just some sweet-talking, Ling Zhenxue would have long since sweet-talked her into becoming his wife. Why else would there be so much hassle? Over a dozen days later, they arrived at Wind Capital City, and found an inn to stay in. They would wash away the dirt from the journey, and set out again after some rest. The transference portal that crossed heavenly realms was located in wide Western City, which was at least another month's journey away from here. At night, Yang Xiao departed quietly. He had previously come here before, and befriended a gang of scoundrels. And now, it was time for him to make use of this connection. Ling Han broke into a faint smile. The Xianyin source water-divided soul walked out from his body, and tailed Yang Xiao, while his original body continued to play mahjong with the Empress, Hunyeo, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Ro was serving tea and water from the sidelines, completely behaving like a little wife. Wind Capital City was also a large city. Yang Xiao flew all the way, crossing mountains and seas, and after more than 6 hours, he finally arrived at a small village. Young Master Yang. Young Master Yang. Young Master Yang, long time no see. When they saw Yang Xiao, the villagers all greeted him respectfully. He was an heir of an 8th heaven celestial king tier force. He only had to say one casual word, and their vicious bear gang would be completely destroyed overnight. Yang Xiao bore a slightly reserved smile. In the past, when he had come to Wind Capital City, a conflict had risen up between him and the Vicious Bear Gang because of a minor matter. However, when the gang leader of Vicious Bear Gang, Xueqi, found out about his origins, he immediately brought valuable gifts to him as settlement for their dispute. Xueqi was a Yang soul elite, yet lowered himself to address Yang Xiao as brother, which made the latter feel very respected, and they had also gradually become good friends. "Is Brother C here?" he asked. "Yes, yes." A gang member hurriedly led the way, bringing Yang Xiao to a manor. Very soon, they arrived at the main hall, and there was presently a show of song and dance. A banquet was presently being held. Ha 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 ha, my dear brother Yang. A tall and well-built man walked forwards to greet him. He really was like a vicious bear given human form. It was the present master of the vicious bear gang, Xueqi. He spread out his arms to embrace Yang Xiao. Brother C. Yang Xiao also spread out his own arms to greet him. The two men exchanged a greeting hug for a while, and then released each other. My good brother, why do you have time to see your brother C today? Xueqi asked with a smile. There is a matter that I would like to ask for your help in, brother C. Yang Xiao was not reserved, either. Though Xueqi's cultivation level far surpassed his, he did not have much reverence towards Xueqi, because the former was only the leader of a gang of scoundrels. Even if he was strong, so what? How could he compare to Yang Xiao, who was a proper and noble disciple of a great sect? If you have trouble, go ahead and tell me. As long as it's doable, brother C would definitely not refuse. Xueqi clapped a hand on his chest, displaying a heroism that reached to the clouds. It really is just a small matter, Yang Xiao said. He smiled. I like a girl, but that girl doesn't seem to have much affection towards me yet, so I would like to ask brother C to help me arrange a good show of the hero rescuing the beauty. Haha, I understand. Xueqi laughed loudly, patting Yang Xiao's shoulder. All beautiful women love heroes. I will definitely send out someone to perform as perfectly as possible so that my dear brother can put on a majestic and mighty display as a hero. If there was some other scene, it would be even better. Yang Xiao considered for a moment. For example, the people that brother C sends could drug that girl with some aphrodisiac or something. Fuck, this guy was really quite despicable. Xueqi thought this in his heart, but the smile on his face became brighter. Sure. Of course, no problem at all. Yang Xiao showed an expectant expression. Tomorrow, when Chen Shuangshuang was assaulted by the evil tyrants, he would interfere when she was in the most danger, saving Chen Shuangshuang, which would definitely make her heart beat faster for him. And afterwards, when the aphrodisiac took effect, he would pretend to use all sorts of excuses, yet in the end, the matter would be settled, and then it would be too late to change anything. So how would he need to fear that Chen Shuangshuang wouldn't be dead set on him in the future? To deal with this kind of insensitive woman, there was definitely a need for extreme measures. Ling Han stood on the roof. This divided soul was manifested from the Xianyin source water. When he withheld his aura, he would be no different from a drop of water. To say nothing that there were a few young souls beneath him, even if there was an immortal palace tier, there was no way the latter could discover his presence. So that was the case. Ling Han chuckled, and changed his plans of charging downstairs to eliminate a vile character like Yang Xiao. It was better for him to let Chen Shuangshuang see clearly the latter's true nature. With such a comparison, she would be able to tell how valuable Ling Jianxue's fondness for her was. Sigh, he was really going to a lot of trouble for the sake of his son. Ling Han turned, and he soon disappeared without a trace with a leap. My dear brother, I have recently obtained a secret technique, and have been thinking of finding a time to contact you so we could study it together, and it just so happened that you have come today, Xueqi said. Oh, what kind of secret technique? Yang Xiao asked carelessly, not taking it to heart at all. What kind of secret technique could a gangster actually have? Yang Xiao was an heir of the heavenly Saint Palace, and any celestial technique that he had would be considered a supreme secret technique by countless other forces. Xueqi chuckled. He could see the other's disdain, but did not refute this. He only said, this secret technique can allow one's battle prowess to instantly soar 10 times over. What? Yang Xiao immediately leaped to his feet, appearing incredibly stunned. A 10-fold boost of battle prowess, are you kidding me? Chapter 2103. A Dark Secret Technique. It was not that Yang Xiao had never come into contact with secret techniques. There were some secret techniques that could allow one to experience a burst of 3 to 4 times their usual battle prowess, but all those required you to induce self-harm, or would cause very great aftereffects in your future. But a boost of battle prowess by 10 times was too much. There was no secret technique that could accomplish that. Brother C, you're kidding, right? Yang Xiao asked. If there really existed this kind of secret technique, it would be much, much too awesome. Xiao Cheng. Xiao Cheng waved a hand. Immediately, a youth walked out, and cupped his hands in obeisance towards Xueqi. Lord C. Xueqi nodded, and asked Yang Xiao, you know of Xiao Cheng, right? Yang Xiao nodded. Xiao Cheng was that person that had entered into a conflict with him all those years ago. Though hundreds of thousands of years had passed since then, it was as if it had just happened yesterday to him. Hee, why don't you guys have a spar? Xueqi asked with a smile. Young Master Yang, please. Xiao Cheng took a few steps back and went into position. Yang Xiao revealed an arrogant expression. At that time, he had only just advanced into the fourth severance, and Xiao Cheng had stagnated at fourth severance for who knew how many years. He had polished his battle prowess to an incredibly strong extent, but even then, so what? He had still been defeated at his hands. That was because he was a king tier, and was invincible among his peers. Presently, he had reached the peak stage fourth severance, and it was even more impossible that Xiao Cheng was a match for him. He only needed 10 moves, no 3. Within 3 moves, he would be able to suppress his opponent. Ha! A possibility flashed through his mind. Could it be that Xiao Cheng had taught Xiao Cheng the secret technique to increase one's battle prowess? How could this be? If even such a character like Xiao Cheng could learn such a profound secret technique, what justice was there left in this world? He thought thus in his heart, and also slowly went into position as well. Then let's exchange a few moves. Xiao Cheng immediately moved. He shot out a punch, and there was no wave of regulations, yet it was like a darkness was approaching to swallow him up, possessing endless might. What? Yang Xiao was shocked, and hurriedly shot out his own fist to greet the incoming strike. Pang! The 2 fists crashed into one another, and a shock wave surged out from where the 2 fists collided, spreading out in all directions in the main hall. Xueqi chuckled, and pressed out with his right hand. Wang, a massive sphere of darkness appeared, trapping all the impact from this shock wave within. Wang, energy surged out madly, but the dark sphere was still not destroyed. He was a Yin Soul super elite, so it was naturally no big deal for him to disperse the shock wave from a fourth severance level battle. Tang tang ting. Both Yang Xiao and Xiao Cheng took 7 steps back consecutively, and then steadied their footing respectively. In this exchange, they had come out in a tie. Yet Yang Xiao paled in shock. How could this be possible? There had clearly been no changes to the other's cultivation level. He was still at the peak stage fourth severance, and it was impossible that he could suddenly acquire the aptitude of a king Tai. If he really had had that kind of natural talent, he would have long since been taken in as disciple by some great sect. Wouldn't that be much better than being a local tyrant and scoundrel here? But why had Yang Xiao only managed to battle his opponent to a tie? Hundreds of thousands of years ago, he was already capable of suppressing the other, and now he had reached the peak stage fourth severance. Logically, he should have been able to easily overcome his opponent, but why had they come out in a tie now instead? A 10-fold boost of battle prowess. This could allow an ordinary cultivator to become a king tier. Then if he learned it, would he be able to make the leap from king tier to emperor tier? His heart beat wildly. If he was an emperor tier, he would be able to become a core disciple, and if he was even more powerful and leaped into the ranks of monarch tiers, there was a chance that he could become a holy son. Holy son. The moment he thought of these words, his scalp had become numb from excitement. What disciple did not want to become a holy son? This was a symbol of status, and also represented supreme glory, and was also a recognition of strength. As for anyone that became a holy son, as long as they could continue living, there was not one that did not eventually become a celestial king. Xiao Cheng charged over again. Pang 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 pang. The 2 men continued to battle intensely. Yang Xiao discovered to his shock that Xiao Cheng had indeed increased his battle prowess by 10 times. No, it was more than 10 times. Furthermore, there seemed to be no limits unlike ordinary secret techniques, such as it could only take effect for a short period of time. Stop, Xueqi called out loudly, pressing down his hands, and both Xiao Cheng and Yang Xiao stopped. My dear brother, how is it? Xueqi looked at Yang Xiao smilingly, looking like he was absolutely certain that the latter would bite the bait. Yang Xiao's heart beat wildly, and he could not care any longer about whatever pride he should have as the disciple of a great sect. He hurriedly exclaimed, Brother Si, please teach me. Xueqi was internally pleased with himself. Though fourth severance was not even worth a mention in his eyes, he still felt very pleased when having a disciple of a great sect to adopt such a humble attitude in front of him. He clapped a hand onto Yang Zhao's shoulder. My good brother, what relationship do we have? Whatever I have, I will naturally share with you. Thank you, brother C. Yang Zhao was really quite grateful. He had never realized that the leader of a gang of scoundrels could actually be so pleasing to his eyes. Actually, the cultivation of this secret technique is very simple. You only have to believe in a deity, Xueqi explained calmly. As simple as that? Yang Zhao naturally did not believe it. If my dear brother does not believe me, you can immediately try it. However, let me be frank. The matter of this secret technique definitely cannot be told to another person, Xueqi said solemnly. Yang Zhao nodded, but he did not take it seriously. Wasn't that natural? If he possessed such a secret technique, how could he possibly teach it to another? He would definitely monopolize it. Only an idiot like Xueqi would actually teach it to others. Had his head been kicked by a donkey? Come, dear brother, come. Let me first bring you to pay your greetings to the honored statue of the deity. Xueqi slung an arm around Yang Zhao's shoulders, and they left. Yang Zhao had been gone for 3 days and 3 nights, and it was only on the morning of the 4th day that he returned. Chen Shuangshuang was naturally curious where the senior brother had gone, but Yang Zhao only said that he had been to a gathering of friends, gotten drunk, and forgot about the time, and that was his explanation for his absence. Ling Han felt a little strange. Hadn't this guy already arranged his plans to put on a show of playing the hero to save the beauty? Then, he should take advantage of the opportunity so that things wouldn't be too late. Why had he disappeared for as long as 3 days? At first, Ling Han had thought that after he returned, Yang Zhao, too, would return not too long later. If he had known, his divided soul should have stayed there for a while longer. Come, junior sister. Let me bring you somewhere fun. Then we will set out to return back to the sect tomorrow, Yang Zhao said smilingly, a darkness hidden within the depths of his eyes. However, it was concealed very, very well, and even Ling Han, the Empress, and Hu Niu had not discovered it with their insight. It was unfortunate that Xiao Gu was not here, as he had gone to find someone new to mimic. Otherwise, he would probably be able to tell that something was off. Chen Shuangshuang could not refuse Yang Zhao's enthusiasm, and thus agreed to go together. They went to a valley. It was completely filled with blue mulberry trees, and looked like an expansive blue ocean at first glance. It was indeed very beautiful, and even the Empress, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and bewitching maiden Ro liked it very much. Hu Niu naturally was the unusual one. She was yawning in boredom. She would rather eat a few more chicken drumsticks than waste her time here. What was so fun about this? Weren't they just blue tree leaves? Just at this moment, the mulberry trees swayed, and 7 men all dressed in different styles walked out of the forest. When they discovered the Empress and the others, their eyes immediately widened as they stared. Such beauty, too beautiful. Tisk. TSK. TSK. No wonder I have heard the magpies cry the moment I woke up this morning, so there would indeed be something pleasant happening today. Among the 7 people, a young man dressed in green robes clapped his fan as he surveyed the Empress and the other women. Of course, his focus was placed on the Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching maiden Ro. After all, the 3 women were the most beautiful, and their features were also the most distinguishing. The rogues were here. Chapter 2104. Adding drama. Yang Zhao understood the situation. It was time for him to impress. He was the first to step forward, afraid that Ling Han might seize this opportunity instead. If Ling Han stepped forward, how could he impress anyone? Even though these 7 people all looked unfamiliar, just how many people were in the vicious bear gang? Thus, it was only natural that he didn't recognize all of them. What are you people trying to do? He chided. What are we trying to do? A young man asked with a wanton chuckle. He peered at the Empress and Hu Niu, and replied, We're obviously here to do these girls. Ha ha ha. The 6 people behind him all roared with laughter. Good one, young Master Bing. Even a casual remark from young Master Bing is golden. This is a remark that can go down through the ages. Wonderful, wonderful. The 6 people fervently sucked up to young Master Bing, causing him to feel extremely smug. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Things seemed slightly off. He unleashed his divine sense, sending it far into the distance. A smile then spread across his face. Interesting. He pushed aside any thought of stepping forward and using violence. At the same time, he faintly shook his head at the Empress and Hunyeo, gesturing for them to remain calm. The Empress and the others had indeed felt the urge to lash out. This person actually dared to speak such vulgarity before them? How could they not be enraged? However, since Ling Han had gestured for them to remain calm, there was definitely a reason for this. They would endure this for a moment. Humph! You actually dare to harass innocent women in broad daylight? How truly audacious! Yang Xiao said with an ice-cold expression. However, he couldn't help but give them a thumbs up in his mind. As expected of a gang of thugs. They didn't need to act at all, since they were naturally thugs. Young Master Bing's expression suddenly darkened, and he mused, "You're very arrogant, huh? You actually dare to utter nonsense before me?" Exactly. Do you know who young Master Bing is? His identity will scare you to death. Forget about it. Just kill him and be done with it. After all, young Master Bing has developed an interest in those beautiful women. I'll do it. A man stepped forward. He was dressed in gray, and his clothes looked extremely ordinary at first glance. Upon closer inspection, however, one would realize that his clothes weren't ordinary at all. The soft glow of a formation pulsated, and this was definitely a treasured item of clothing. Brat die, the man roared as he threw a punch. Yang Xiao felt even more grateful towards Xueqi. His fourth brother was truly willing to invest. In fact, he had even prepared such valuable clothing for a mere thug. Their acting was far too realistic. These thoughts flashed through his mind, yet he didn't hesitate at all as he lashed out in response. Pang pang pang. An intense battle broke out, and it wasn't long before Yang Xiao gained the upper hand. Moreover, this was an overwhelming advantage he had. They were both at the fourth severance, yet Yang Xiao was a king tier, while his opponent was only an ordinary cultivator. Thus, the gulf between them quickly became evident. Yang Xiao was feeling extremely smug at this moment. He was truly enjoying this performance. Just look! How incredibly mighty he was! Pang! His palm strike struck the man in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. At the same time, he even gave a meaningful blink, seemingly saying, "Brother, your performance was fairly great. When you return, fourth brother will definitely reward you well." Oof! The man groaned as he retreated 30 steps before finally coming to a stop. There was a salty taste in his mouth, and when he wiped his hand across it, he saw blood. "Guai, what's wrong?" the others asked. The man was enraged as he pointed at Yang Xiao, and shouted, "This person is a freak. He was making eyes at me." What? The thugs behind young Master Bing were all transfixed with shock. Making eyes at a man? Just how much of a freak was this person? "Guai, he even touched your chest just then," some exclaimed in alarm. Guai's face turned green with disgust as he clutched his chest. Indeed. Why did he insist on striking my chest? There were so many other places he could have targeted. Freak! Meanwhile, Yang Xiao was also feeling completely stumped. This wasn't part of the plan. Why were they calling him a freak? What the fuck? The Empress and the others finally came to a realization at this moment. They communicated with Ling Han using their divine sense, asking, "These people aren't from the Vicious Bear Gang?" "No, they're not," Ling Han replied with a shake of his head. "The people from the Vicious Bear Gang are still making their way over here, but I've already sent a divided soul over to cause some trouble for them. They won't arrive anytime soon." He had sent his 9 heavens flame divided soul over, and with its grasp of the regulations of time and the regulations of space, those severing mundane tier thugs were guaranteed to be trapped there for a long time. Moreover, even though time would have slowed down for them, they wouldn't realize it at all. "So, these 7 people are genuine thugs then?" Bewitching Maiden Ro asked in astonishment. Ling Han smiled as he nodded. Things were getting a little interesting now. This person is fairly strong. We need to send Brother June over to deal with him. The thugs all turned around to glance at a relatively short man. He looked to be in his 30s, and his appearance was extremely ordinary. However, even young Master Bing became slightly more respectful as he said, "Brother June, please deal with this person." The man nodded and replied, "Since young Master Bing has asked, I naturally have no reason to refuse." He strode forward as he said this, and flashes of light appeared on all 10 of his fingers. Surprisingly, there was a ring on each of his fingers, and these rings were all as pitch black as ink. Yang Xiao suddenly tensed up. He could feel an overwhelming pressure exuding from this person. He couldn't explain what was going on. This was simply his intuition as a king tier. Fuck. This is only a performance. Is there any need to be so serious? If you want to live, kneel down and beg for forgiveness, Brother June said in a calm voice. He cracked his knuckles as he said this. Yang Xiao wore an arrogant expression, and he immediately immersed himself in the performance again. I, Yang Xiao, have never begged for forgiveness. Immediately apologize to my junior sister and the 4 ladies. Otherwise, I'll have you understand the terror of my rage. You're seeking death, Brother June said with a sneer. Whoosh. With a flash, he charged toward Yang Xiao. He's only an ordinary 4th Severance cultivator? Yang Xiao was slightly astonished. He had clearly felt overwhelming pressure from this person. So how was the latter only an ordinary 4th Severance cultivator? Yang Xiao didn't dare to be careless, and his hands immediately spread open as he unleashed a celestial technique. Boom! The power of regulation surged, and the power of the Great Tao collided. However, how could an ordinary 4th Severance cultivator rival a king tier? Thus, it wasn't long before Brother June was also pushed onto his back foot. However, young Master Bing and the others didn't appear worried about this at all. It was as if they held unwavering confidence in this Brother June. Yang Xiao also found this to be understandable. His opponents were most likely putting on this demeanor to amplify the effects of their performance. By the looks of it, he had indeed been overthinking things. This person most likely possesses a divine fetus. Poisonous fetus, the Empress added. Ha! Detestable. Hunyo said in disgust. Poisonous fetuses were also a type of divine fetus. However, they were an extremely unique type of divine fetus. Divine fetuses can also come powerful or weak. His divine fetus is far too weak, so he can most likely only launch a single strike with it. Thus, he's waiting for an opportunity, Ling Han said as he observed the battle. Anyhow, it's almost time for victory and defeat to be decided. Yang Xiao had already become impatient. After all, his might could only be highlighted if he achieved victory in 2 or 3 exchanges. So, why in the world were they dragging this battle on for so long? He roared in fury as he abandoned his defenses and lunged at Brother June. After abandoning his defenses, his offensive power naturally rose by an explosive amount. Boom! He was like a tidal wave as he bore down on Brother June. Explode! Brother June roared. He wasn't fazed in the slightest. In fact, a faint smile spread across his face. This was a smile of extreme ridicule. Pa 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 pa. The rings on his fingers exploded, causing plumes of green smoke to flood the surroundings. At this moment, Yang Xiao finally understood the source of his discomfort. This green smoke was definitely brimming with extreme poison that could instantly kill or severely wound him. In any case, he definitely had to avoid this green smoke. Fuck. This is completely different from what we agreed on. How in the world are you people performing? Why are you randomly adding drama for yourself? Do you still want to stay in the gang or not? Chapter 2105. Ah, I've made a mistake. However, Yang Xiao had rashly charged forward, and he had even abandoned all of his defenses. That being the case, how could he dodge now? But I've sacrificed my defense to unleash this attack, so how are you going to block me? You were clearly meant to make me the hero, yet you're making this into a loss for both sides. Just what in the world are you doing? Yang Xiao couldn't help but roar at the lack of professionalism of these people in his mind. What the fuck was Xueqi doing? Hadn't they already discussed this several days ago? Yet, he had still sent such amateurs over to perform today. Pang! Yang Xiao's palm was quicker than the green smoke as it struck Brother June's chest. Initially, he had only wanted to wound his opponent. After all, this was only a performance. However, in his fit of rage, he didn't retract much of his power, so his attack would definitely deal severe wounds to his opponents. Yet, when his palm struck, Brother Jun's chest instantly became extremely soft and flexible. Yang Xiao was deeply astonished as he stared at Brother Jun transforming into a puddle of green liquid. A fragrant sweet scent wafted into his nose. This was a scent that could immediately render people unconscious. Poisonous physique. He immediately exclaimed in his mind. This was a type of divine fetus, a very rare type at that. So that's how it is. He finally came to a realization. His opponent had purposefully drawn him to launch a rash attack so that he could unleash his poison to attack him. Meanwhile, he would also rely on his divine fetus to deal with his attack. This divine fetus was extremely weak, yet it was still more than enough to deal with his attack. As for Yang Xiao, his situation was as miserable as could be. Fucking hell. You people are taking this performance far too seriously. No one told you to fight with your life on the line, okay? You people are far too unprofessional. You were clearly meant to be defeated by me, so why are you turning around to defeat me instead? Pang! Green smoke licked over, completely engulfing Yang Xiao. When the green smoke passed, Yang Xiao had already collapsed to the ground. His entire body was convulsing, and he appeared to be suffering immense pain. My poison is called Silent Death and Extermination, and this is a corpse poison that I extracted from the corpse of a celestial. Those who are affected by this poison will be engulfed in an aura of death that renders them immobile. Even if they wish for death, they'll have no way to die. Only after suffering immense pain for 3 days and 3 nights will they transform into a dry corpse, Brother Jun said in a calm voice. His body had already returned to normal. It was just that he had gone slightly pale. The power of his divine fetus was truly very weak. Thus, unleashing an attack with it had also drained all of his power and put significant stress on his body. He felt extremely unwell at this moment. Motherfucker! Yang Xiao couldn't speak, so he could only glare at this person in fury. What's the meaning of this? What the fuck is the meaning of this? You were meant to perform, yet what the fuck are you people doing now? You even unleashed the silent death and extermination on me? Exterminate your entire fucking family. These people were far too unprofessional. When he returned, he would definitely protest to his 4th brother. Senior brother Yang, Chen Shuangshuang exclaimed. Her mind was kind of slow, and she only came to her senses at this moment. Because Yang Xiao had enjoyed an advantage the entire time, she hadn't expected that he would collapse so suddenly. Ha ha ha! Young Master Bing roared with laughter. How is it? Does anyone else refuse to yield? He stepped on Yang Zhao's head, and he even pressed down with his foot, causing Yang Zhao's head to slightly deform. Senior brother Yang! Senior brother Yang! Chen Shuangshuang exclaimed in concern. This wasn't because she liked him, but because they were from the same sect. She hurriedly turned to Ling Han and said, "Please save my senior brother." Ling Han smiled in reply, saying, "It's no big deal. His skin is thick, so he won't die from this." Yang Xiao almost fainted in anger. Was this a problem of dying or not? This was far too humiliating. Perhaps these fools had made a mistake and mistaken Ling Han for him? So they were waiting for Ling Han to step forward to save the beauties. Fuck! Where are these fools from? They're fucking blind. The lot of them. Tap tap tap. There was the sound of hurried footsteps as 9 people crawled out from the blue mulberry forest. Like young Master Bing and the others, these people were all radiating with the auras of thugs. All they needed to do was write the word thug on their foreheads to complete their getup. Oh, what beautiful women. Let this brother, huh? The 9 people immediately started to harass the Empress and the others when they arrived, yet they couldn't help but feel astonished when they saw Yang Xiao lying on the ground. Why was the protagonist lying on the ground? How could they still continue this performance? Ha! Even though Yang Xiao couldn't move, because he was facing this direction, he could still see everything clearly. Of these 9 people, he could recognize at least 4 of them. Moreover, their leader was none other than Xiao Cheng. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Fuck. I've made a mistake. The 7 people just then weren't from the vicious bear gang at all. They were genuine thugs. Fuck. No wonder they were so violent and ferocious. They weren't acting at all. Gasp. He couldn't help but draw another cold breath. Since that was the case, Wasn't he facing the danger of death in young Master Bing's hands? He was acutely aware of just how domineering these young masters were. They wouldn't bat an eyelid at killing people. If he revealed his Heavenly Saint Palace identity, these people definitely wouldn't dare to touch him. In fact, they would even fall to their knees in terror and beg for forgiveness. However, the problem was that he couldn't speak at all right now. He couldn't unleash his divine sense, either, and he was much like a living corpse. The people from the vicious bear gang faltered. What in the world was going on? The performance had already finished before they arrived? Moreover, the protagonist had been defeated. Hurry! Hurry up and save young Master Yang! They hurriedly shouted. They then charged forward to face off with young Master Bing and the others. A smile spread across Ling Han's face. He turned to Chen Xueqi and said, "Look, he has heaps of friends. He doesn't need our help at all." Young Master Bing humphed and said, "Who are you people? You dare to act with such audacity before me? Who gives sh*t about you? Hurry up and release young Master Yang." Xiao Qing shouted. "You actually dare to refer to someone else as young master before me?" Young Master Bing said with a humph. "I'm very angry, and the consequences are very severe." He paused for a moment before continuing in a baleful voice. "Kill them, kill all of them." "As you wish, young master." The thugs behind him immediately lunged forward. However, Brother June stepped back. After using the power of his divine fetus, he was now in an extremely weak and frail state. His battle prowess was far inferior compared to before, so he naturally couldn't participate in this battle. "Die! Save young Master Yang!" Xiao Cheng and the others roared. They drew their sabers and swords as they charged forward. Clang! Clang! A chaotic battle instantly ensued. These people were initially meant to be defeated by the heroic protagonist, yet with a shake, they had become the heroes trying to rescue the beauty. This was an incredible transformation. Interesting, how very interesting. Ling Han retrieved a few wooden stools from the Black Tower. He handed them to the Empress, Hu Niu, and the others. At the same time, he even retrieved some sunflower seeds to snack on. Chen Xueqi was dazed upon seeing this. "You people are far too calm, no? Everyone's fighting right now, and so be it if you don't help. Yet, you're snacking on sunflower seeds as you watch on? Do you still care about other people's feelings?" "Don't worry, take a seat," Ling Han said as he retrieved another stool. As he did this, he also passed her some sunflower seeds. "Ha! Spiritual sunflower seeds!" Chen Xueqi immediately exclaimed. She had quite a keen eye. Spiritual sunflowers were celestial medicines, and their seeds were more so the essence. Thus they were as valuable as could be. Its medicinal age is only 1 billion years or so. It's not mature enough for alchemical pills, so just treat it as a snack, Ling Han said with a smile. Treat celestial medicines as a snack? Chen Xueqi was astounded. Although celestial medicines of 1 billion years old were indeed insufficient to be called great herbs, it was still far too wasteful to treat them as mere snacks. However, she liked this. In any case, her mind was extremely simple. She was only at the third severance, and she was far weaker than Yang Xiao. Thus, since even Yang Xiao was no match for these people, what help would she be? That being the case, this fight could be dealt with by other people. She would just sit back and enjoy the show lest she made matters worse. And thus, she also sat down and started to snack on sunflower seeds as she spectated the battle. Fuck! I'm still lying here with my life and death hanging in the balance. A miserable wail sounded in Yang Zhao's mind. Chapter 2106. Truth. Delicious. Wonderful performance. So fun. Ling Han and the others could all be considered as unreliable people. They continued to snack on sunflower seeds as they spectated the battle. This was truly a good way to pass time. Meanwhile, even though there were only 5 people from young Master Bing's side in the battle, each of them was at the peak stage of the first severance. Their battle prowess was superior, so it wasn't long before they suppressed Xiao Cheng and the others. Bunch of trash. Kill them all. Die. They were brimming with killing intent, and they were ruthless as they attacked. They were going to kill Xiao Cheng and the others. Puh, puh, Pooh! Blood sprayed through the air, and severed limbs danced in the sky. The battle prowess of those from the vicious bear gang was extremely uneven, so how could they rival the might of these 5 people? They instantly crumbled in defeat. After a dozen or so exchanges, 3 of them collapsed, dead. Chen Xueqi couldn't maintain her composure any longer. Regardless of how simple her mind was, she couldn't remain unwavering after seeing those people killed. Meanwhile, Ling Han crossed his legs with a smile, and said, "Don't worry, it's merely 2 dogs going at each other." He paused for a moment before continuing, "Your senior brother is acquainted with the group who came later, and he had initially planned to have them harass you. At that time, he would then step forward and play the hero who saved the beauties. Unexpectedly, however, some people came over to ruin his good show, which has led to the situation now." "I don't believe you," Chen Xueqi immediately shouted. She wouldn't allow her senior brother to be slandered like this. "Whether I'm speaking nonsense or not, I urge you to carefully think about it yourself," Ling Han said. Chen Xueqi carefully mulled over this, and she immediately discovered several suspicious points. For example, young Master Yang had clearly been going easy on young Master Bing's underlings at the start. This wasn't like him. Moreover, Xiao Cheng and the others had also acted like thugs when they arrived, and they had even spoken to harass them. After seeing young Master Yang on the ground, however, they had immediately changed their attitude. After eliminating all of the impossibilities, no matter how inconceivable the result was, it would still be the truth. Senior brother Yang is actually such kind of person. Despicable, shameless, dirty. Chen Xueqi was indeed simple-minded. However, this was different from being stupid. Otherwise, how could she have become a disciple of the heavenly Saint Palace? She immediately returned to her seat. As she glanced at Yang Xiao, the anger in her mind blazed increasingly fierce. He actually wanted to steal her heart like this. How preposterous. If she were so easy to move, she would have married someone millions of years ago. "It's not this simple," Ling Han continued in a leisurely voice. "Together with the vicious bear gungo, that's right, the group of thugs who arrived later are from the vicious bear gang. Anyhow, he had already planned this out with them. After capturing you, they were going to feed you some aphrodisiac or whatnot." How shameless. Chen Xueqi chided in fury. She could barely contain herself from charging over to stomp on Yang Shuang's face. A look of slight astonishment spread across Yang Zhao's face. It wasn't that he wasn't deeply astonished, but rather that his muscles were far too rigid and stiff at this moment, rendering him unable to move them. There was utter shock in his mind. How did Ling Han know about this? "You're even more shameless than me," young Master Bing said as he stomped on Yang Zhao's face. "I only tried to forcefully capture them, but you. Even evil people don't try to trick others like this. Accept my disdain." Yang Xiao felt so frustrated that he wanted to die. He was actually being looked down on by young Master Bing. "Ah!" Xiao Cheng suddenly roared in fury. Boom! A black aura suddenly burst forth from his body. This was neither mist nor smoke, yet it was incredibly thick and dense. This aura flooded an area of 9 meters around his body, and it almost completely covered his figure. However, his aura instantly became several times more powerful, and it was as if he were a completely different person. Ling Han instantly stood up. It wasn't Xiao Cheng's strength that surprised him. In reality, he wouldn't be surprised even if Xiao Cheng were 10,000 times more powerful. Rather, he was already very familiar with this aura. This was another cultivation system. Ling Han recalled the island that he had gone to, and he recalled how the people there would accept those who had suffered disasters at sea. They would lure these people into darkness, manipulating them into believing their so-called deity. They would introduce them to another cultivation system, and this was in order to overthrow the current heaven and earth. Some survivors had left the island long ago, and they were spreading the belief of this so-called deity in the celestial realm. They were also advocating the different cultivation system, thereby severing the foundations of the current heaven and earth. Of course, this advocation naturally couldn't occur among large and powerful sections. Instead, it would only occur among low-level cultivators. Ling Han had initially thought that this cultivation system would only spread among those under the celestial level. By the looks of it, however, he had been far too optimistic. The situation was already extremely dire. Anyhow, Xiao Cheng's transformation instantly turned the tides of the battle. Brother Jun had also defeated Yang Xiao using the element of surprise. Otherwise, with how King Tears could dominate ordinary cultivators, how could Yang Xiao have been defeated and captured? Now, Xiao Cheng was doing the same thing. Boom! Xiao Cheng was like the demon lord of a dark world. Even though he clearly hadn't summoned any power of regulations, each of his attacks was brimming with destructive power. No one dared to face his attacks head-on, and they could only flee in disarray. Xiao Cheng charged at young Master Bing, and Brother Jun immediately stepped forward in an attempt to block him. However, how could his battle prowess rival that of Xiao Cheng? He gritted his teeth, and 10 rings immediately appeared on his fingers again. With a crack, these rings exploded in unison, sending a plume of green smoke into the surroundings. However, Xiao Cheng didn't dodge or evade, and his hand stabbed at Brother Jun's chest like a razor-sharp saber. Brother Jun activated the same technique again, transforming his body into a poisonous green liquid. As long as their cultivation level was equivalent, no one could hope to wound him when he was in this form. Of course, this invincibility could only last for a brief moment. Moreover, being forced to activate the power of his divine fetus twice in a day, he was definitely going to suffer severe wounds. Pooh! Xiao Cheng's hand stabbed down, causing a fountain of blood to spray into the air. Brother Jun's poisonous physique was utterly useless against him. Brother Jun wore a dazed expression as he stared at his opponent. He could feel that his heart had already been ruptured. Moreover, an indescribable power of destruction was spreading from his heart into his mind and divine sense. This was an unstoppable power. In an instant, his divine sense was completely obliterated into nothingness. He was filled with grief and vexation. Even his divine fetus had failed to block this strike. Impossible! If he had known this earlier, he definitely wouldn't have come here. He had only wanted to ride on the Long Clan's coattail, and he certainly hadn't wanted to sacrifice his life for them. Ling Han faltered for a moment before coming to a realization. Even though divine fetuses were powerful, and even though Brother Jun's poisonous physique could allow him to resist all abilities for a brief moment, these abilities only referred to the regulations of this heaven and earth. However, Xiao Cheng belonged to another cultivation system, so he naturally wouldn't be affected by this divine fetus. These were two contrasting heavens and earth. This was the standoff between two different heavens and earth. Young Master Bing hurriedly fled in fright. Fortunately, Xiao Cheng's target was only Yang Xiao, so he didn't give chase, allowing young Master Bing to escape. Xiao Cheng immediately snatched young Master Yang over, shouting, "Young Master Yang! Young Master Yang!" If Yang Xiao were able to, he would definitely leap up and furiously slap this person. Are you fucking blind? Can't you see that I've been poisoned, and can't speak or move at all? What the fuck are you shouting about? Hurry up and find someone to treat me. However, it was a shame that Xiao Cheng's intelligence was truly limited. He continued to aimlessly shout, not knowing what else to do. Let's go! Let's go! Young Master Bing shouted. He called on all of his debauched friends to leave. They were indeed no match for Xiao Cheng and the others. However, Xiao Cheng didn't give chase, as his mind was completely focused on how to deal with Yang Xiao. If something untoward happened to Yang Xiao, he would definitely be smacked to death by Xueqi. Yang Xiao naturally wasn't worth much. However, he was a chess piece and a seedling. He was someone who would overthrow the Heavenly Saint Palace in the future. He finally came to his senses at this moment, and he hurriedly lifted Yang Xiao up. He would bring him to the vicious bear gang. Hold on, Ling Han said as he raised an arm to block him. Chapter 2107. Who's above you? Why are you blocking me? Xiao Cheng asked loudly. His eyes were blazing with killing intent. Whoever stopped him from saving Yang Xiao was his enemy. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Come, let's have a chat." Have a chat? There's nothing to chat about with you, Xiao Cheng said. His voice was vicious as he continued, "If you don't move aside, I'll kill you." How long have you been practicing this cultivation method? Ling Han asked. His expression was calm and amiable, and it was as if he were chatting with a friend. Piss off, Xiao Cheng roared. He immediately launched an attack at Ling Han. Ling Han casually replied with a strike of his own. Pa! Xiao Cheng's attack was immediately blocked. However, Xiao Qing naturally wouldn't give up so easily. Pang pang pang. He continued to attack, yet he was unable to breach Ling Han's defenses at all. He was simply attacking in vain. Hu Niu became impatient, and she suddenly jumped out of her seat. She grabbed Xiao Cheng's neck before smashing him into the ground again and again. Pang pang pang. Xiao Cheng lost consciousness after just a few slams. Yang Xiao saw all of this, and his mind instantly became numb with fear. As it turned out, these people were all so powerful. Yet, he had actually dared to target the three women. He had been seeking death. Fortunately, because of this reason and that, he hadn't turned on Ling Han. Otherwise, he would have definitely been killed. Now, however, he still had a sliver of hope. Ling Han glanced at Yang Xiao before reaching over with a hand. He then activated the source power of wood, and suppressed the poison in Yang Xiao's body. His cultivation level was far above that of Brother Jun, and he more so possessed the source power of wood. Thus, suppressing or even erasing this poison was as easy as could be. Who in the world are you? Yang Xiao asked after regaining the ability to speak. He immediately voiced his biggest question. How could these people possibly be Ling Jianshue's relatives? Joining Ling Jianshue's forces? This was far too preposterous. Only someone as simple-minded as Chen Shuangshuang would believe this. Ling Han slapped Yang Zhao's face and smilingly said, I'm the one asking questions, not the other way around, understood? He didn't threaten Yang Xiao, yet he was filled with a dignified and formidable aura that instantly sent chills down Yang Zhao's spine. Understood, Yang Xiao hurriedly said with a nod. All right, tell me about your experiences from these past few days, Ling Han commanded in a calm voice. Yang Xiao hesitated for a brief moment. However, a cold chill instantly gripped his heart. Ling Han's gaze was far too terrifying, and it made him feel the danger of death. He hurriedly recounted his experiences from the past few days. Bastard! Chen Shuangshuang roared in wild rage. Not only did this bastard want to trick her, but he even wanted to feed her aphrodisiac. He truly deserved death. Ling Han told the Empress to calm Chen Shuangshuang down. What he cared more about was what had occurred after he left that day. There's a giant statue under the village, and as long as one sincerely prays before this statue, they'll obtain its blessing and power? Ling Han murmured. This was identical to a scent route island. They would lure people in with an easily obtainable power first, and when these people became addicted, they would convince them to abandon their current cultivation system and adopt a new one. Xueqi definitely harbored sinister intentions. He wanted to use Yang Xiao to infiltrate the Heavenly Saint Palace. If this occurred for generation after generation, it was truly possible that this eighth heaven force would eventually be overtaken. The hands of this dark force had already moved toward a powerful sect like the Heavenly Saint Palace. The situation was much direr than Ling Han had imagined. Ling Han casually waved his hand. Boom! Relentless flames swept by, instantly incinerating Yang Xiao into ashes. Why did you kill him? Chen Shuangshuang asked in a daze. If I didn't kill him, what would I leave him around for? Ling Han asked with a smile. Let's go, let's have a chat with the leader of the vicious bear gang. Hopefully he's a big fish. Oh, that's right. Why has Xiao Gu suddenly disappeared at this kind of time? They set off for the small village. Ling Han had already visited this village once, so returning was naturally very easy. It only took them half a day to arrive. Pang! With a wave of his hand, Ling Han tossed Xiao Cheng forward. Xiao Cheng slid across the street of the village, carving out a deep ditch. Everyone in the village instantly stopped what they were doing to stare at Ling Han. They were all brimming with violent auras. Call your leader over, Ling Han said calmly. Haha, where is this audacious person from? You actually dared to barge into our vicious bear village with several beauties? Are you seeking death? Someone in the village immediately said with a loud laugh. Ling Han snapped his fingers. Whoosh! A burst of sword light swept through the air, sending a column of blood into the sky. The person's head slid off from his neck. His knees buckled, and they thudded into the ground. His headless body then leaned forward and slammed into the ground, sending a plume of dust into the air. He was dead. Deathly silence fell over the village. Thunderous shouts then erupted, and the villagers were all wild with rage. An outsider had actually dared to barge over and kill someone? This was blatant provocation. Kill him. Rape his women. Boom. They all charged at Ling Han, brandishing their swords and sabers as they did so. Ling Han raised a hand. Wang! A burst of sword light burst forth, transforming into several hundred bursts of sword light as it did so. Sword light flooded the entire sky. When these bursts of sword light vanished, not a single person on the street was left alive. Ling Han strode forward. He knew where Xueqi lived. However, whether or not the latter was present was another question. It wasn't long before they arrived at their destination and stopped. This was because Xueqi was already waiting for them at his door. I'm Xueqi. Greetings, everyone. Xueqi was like an elegant and respectful gentleman as he greeted them. He didn't seem like a brute at all. May I know how I offended you to the stage of being so ruthless? Ling Han wore a faint smile as he replied. I didn't like the look of them. How's this reason? Didn't like the look of them? Good one. Xueqi said as he roared with laughter. As he laughed, 7 men instantly appeared, 3 to Ling Han's left and 4 to his right. Xueqi's expression instantly transformed into one of viciousness, and he said, I also don't like the look of you people, so I'm going to kill you all. As he said this, the 7 people lashed out in unison, attacking Ling Han and the others. These 7 people were the pillars of the vicious bear gang, and they were all young soul elites. Thus, by teaming up, they were confident that they could achieve victory. Ling Han casually raised his hand. Wang! The power of regulations transformed into a sword that slashed down at the 7 people. They instantly collapsed to the ground, and the world around them instantly became peaceful and tranquil again. Xueqi's vicious expression instantly vanished, and he said, Brother, let's resolve things peacefully. He was like an obedient dog, and he continued to bow at Ling Han as he spoke. Brother, how should I refer to you? However, when he straightened his body. Whoosh! A burst of black light shot out from his chest, stabbing at Ling Han. This light didn't contain the power of regulations, yet it seemed like a world of its own. It contained a unique regulation, and it was as if it could sever all matter in this world. Ling Han reached forward. Wang! The column of black light ground to a halt before him, unable to advance any further. The power of darkness, he said in a faint voice. He looked at Xueqi, placing him under a mountain of pressure. Xueqi groaned as the color drained from his face. How was this person so powerful? Xueqi was at Yin Soul, and his opponent was also at Yin Soul. Moreover, the former had activated a secret technique, and he had more so received a blessing from the deity. Add to that an element of surprise, and he should have definitely caught Ling Han off guard. Spit it out, who's above you? Ling Han asked. Brother, I only like women. I don't like men. How can there be someone above me? Xueqi said. He continued to act stupid and speak nonsense. Ling Han raised his hand again. Swoosh! A burst of sword light swept forward, instantly severing one of Xueqi's arms. Ah! Xueqi screamed in agony. Chapter 2108. Astonishing Lead. Who's above you? Ling Han asked again. His voice was extremely calm, yet it now carried a hint of killing intent. He definitely wouldn't show mercy, especially to cultivators of the other cultivation system. They were all parasites of the celestial realm. Xueqi wore a conflicted expression, yet his mouth remained tightly shut. You're not going to say, huh? Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, then there's no option but to rape his ass. Xueqi was terrified upon hearing this. Of the pains that he couldn't endure, getting *s raped was definitely one of them. However, upon recalling the punishment for betrayal, his entire body shivered in fright. His mouth remained shut. Let Nyo deal with him. Hu Nyo immediately charged over to pummel Xueqi, transforming him into a pig head. However, even though he wailed in pain like a sissy, he still didn't speak. It's useless, Xueqi said in a feeble voice. There's a restriction in my divine sense, and as long as I mention anything that I shouldn't, This restriction will instantly obliterate my divine sense. Is that the case? Ling Han naturally wouldn't believe him so easily. He placed a hand on Xueqi's forehead, entering with his own divine sense. Wang. His divine sense took form, becoming identical to his physical self. However, it was several times smaller. It then barged into Xueqi's divine sense. Strange. He immediately discovered that Xueqi's divine sense was indeed enveloped by restrictions. Wisps of black aura hovered in the surroundings, radiating with a sinister intent that was completely incompatible with this heaven and earth. A feeling of disgust involuntarily arose in Ling Han's mind. Upon closer inspection, Ling Han discovered that it wasn't himself that was rejecting this aura, but rather the regulations that he practiced. If one didn't practice the regulations of this world, they would be repelled by this world. They would be enemies. This black aura was extremely powerful. Even though there were only wisps of it, they possessed the ability to destroy Ling Han's divine sense. Thus, he didn't dare to rashly target it. However, would he let Xueqi off the hook because of this? He had finally come across a living enemy, so he would definitely squeeze some information out of him no matter what. Can source powers of heaven and earth resist this? With this in mind, Ling Han immediately activated all 4 of his source powers, sending them into Xueqi's body. Ah! Xueqi immediately wailed in agony. 4 columns of brilliant light burst from his body and soared into the sky. It was as if these columns of light connected heaven and earth. After being subject to the power of 4 source powers, Xueqi would be crippled even if he didn't die. However, Ling Han naturally wasn't worried about this. It would be fine as long as Xueqi didn't go crazy or die before Ling Han got any useful information. With the protection of 4 source powers, Ling Han started to assault Xueqi's divine sense. The wisps of black aura immediately started to counterattack, transforming into sabers, swords, axes, and much more. These weapons furiously hacked at Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han controlled his 4 source powers to block these attacks. In battles of the divine sense, what was more important was one's cultivation level. Meanwhile, the 4 source powers were all at the Celestial King tier. If they weren't restricted by Ling Han's cultivation level, their power would far surpass that of Ling Han. Boom! 4-colored light flashed around Ling Han's divine sense, and he was much like a colorful battle god at this moment. He was filled with vigor as he courageously marched forward. Even though he continued to charge forward, he still couldn't help but feel astonished in his mind. This was because his 4 source powers could only destroy the obstructions before him if they worked together. The person who had created this restriction was definitely extremely powerful. When Ling Han was about to reach Xueqi's divine sense, the wisps of black aura seemingly realized that they couldn't block him anymore. They suddenly stopped attacking him, and they instead turned around to slash down at Xueqi's divine sense. Not good! Ling Han shouted in his mind. However, how could he stop this? Boom! Xueqi's divine sense was instantly pulverized. He couldn't withstand this power at all. Damn it! Ling Han had no option but to reach over and fish for fragments of Xueqi's memory. With the help of his 4 source powers, he finally managed to obtain some fragments of memory. Ancient battlefield. Extracting source power. Black Dragon King. Lin Han murmured. He had only obtained a pitiful amount of fragments of Xueqi's memory. However, he had still discovered a few key terms. The most shocking piece of information was naturally the plan to extract source powers. Source powers were born from the will of heaven and earth, and they more so represented the great Tao of heaven and earth. If they were destroyed, that would be a huge blow to heaven and earth. This was analogous to killing someone's son. Just how aggrieved would their parents be? Moreover, this sinister group had a history of doing such things. They had stayed at Ascent Route Island for millions of years, and this was for no other reason than to obtain the firm essence green gold. If it weren't for Ling Han coincidentally encountering a tsunami, and if it weren't for Xiao Gu coincidentally arriving at the right time, the results would have been difficult to predict. However, had that tsunami truly been a coincidence? Suspicion suddenly arose in Ling Han's mind. Heaven and earth possessed a soul, and the existence of heavenly tribulation was proof of this. However, heaven and earth could only operate under some kind of rules, and they couldn't overly interfere with the world. Otherwise, if everyone was dealt a Celestial King tier tribulation, who could survive? Anyhow, was the sudden tsunami that had sent him onto the island a self-saving act of heaven and earth? Ling Han suddenly felt pity for heaven and earth. They clearly possessed the ultimate power of the world, yet they even seemed inferior to measly severing mundane tier cultivators at times. Whoosh! His divine sense retreated from Xueqi's divine sense. Looking down, he saw that Xueqi was already dead. He had no physical wounds, and it was as if he were merely asleep. However, his divine sense had already been pulverized, so he was naturally as dead as could be. How was it? The Empress asked in a solemn voice. Ling Han nodded and replied, I discovered some things. However, these things far exceed our capability. What is it? Someone asked. A figure silently appeared next to them. This was none other than Lu Herong. She truly came and went like a shadow. Ling Han pondered for a moment, and he believed that this wasn't something they could resolve. They needed to seek help from celestial kings. In the celestial realm, those who had the word king in their title were normally all celestial kings. Otherwise, they would be pummeled to death in a few days. The fragments of Xueqi's memory were most likely saying that there was a source power of heaven and earth in the ancient battlefield. Moreover, the sinister force was currently extracting this source power, and the elite in charge was the Black Dragon Celestial King. There had also been a source power of heaven and earth on Ascent Route Island, but the person in charge had only been an ascending origin tier elite. In other words, they had been a 9th Lotus elite. Now, however, the ancient battlefield was actually being guarded by a celestial king. The gulf in power was truly huge. There were only 3 minor levels in the ascending origin tier, yet there were 9 heavens in the celestial king tier. Ascending each level would be as difficult as ascending the heavens, and the gulf between each level was incredibly large. Thus, even Lu Herong might not be able to deal with them. Ling Han pondered for a moment before asking, Senior, do you know about the existence of the other cultivation system? The one that uses first lotus, second lotus, and so on to differentiate their cultivation levels? A look of astonishment spread across Lu Herong's face. What nonsense is this brat spouting? Under the restrictions of the regulations, cultivators can only abide by the rules of heaven and earth. How could there be another cultivation system? Ling Han was also slightly astonished. Lu Herong actually wasn't aware of the existence of the other cultivation system. Even a 4th heaven celestial king hadn't heard about this before. Aya, stop speaking nonsense with her. Hunyo placed her hands on her hips and said, Ugly hag, Nyo orders you to immediately bring elites over. Nyo is going to fight someone. Lu Herong smiled bitterly as she shook her head. The Rock Palace was being brutally suppressed by the Four Seas Palace at the moment, so much so that even their existence was under threat. How could she bring any elites over? Even her presence here was a stretch. Removing a 4th heaven celestial king from the battle was already putting much stress on the Rock Palace's defenses. It wasn't that the Rock Palace was weak, but rather that the Four Seas Palace was far too powerful. In other words, it's up to the few of us to deal with this? Ling Han murmured. There's also Xiao Gu, the Empress said in reminder. Ling Han nodded in agreement. Even though Xiao Gu was unreliable, his strength was indeed incredible. His ordinary battle prowess could rival those at the ascending origin tier. If he unleashed the power of his celestial king bone, he could even rival those at the celestial king tier. Then let's wait for Xiao Gu to return before making any plans. Chapter 2109. Another World. Fortunately, Xiao Gu returned after 2 days. He started to fervently speak after he returned, and it was as if he wanted to repeat everything that he had heard these past few days. This seriously exasperated Ling Han and the others. This was because all that he had heard were conversations between middle-aged women at the marketplace. Could you imagine a bone grumbling about the dear prices of vegetables at the market? Anyhow, Ling Han had already destroyed the statue under the vicious bear gang 2 days ago. It was like a totem, and it could provide its believers with power. Ling Han didn't know how it worked. Xiao Gu, we were all waiting for you. Let's go. Xiao Gu, we were all waiting for you. Let's go. Xiao Gu didn't miss a single word. Mimicking Ling Han was his favorite thing to do. But the problem is, where is the ancient battlefield? Lu Herong had lived for quite long, and according to her knowledge, there were a total of 3 places that could be regarded as ancient battlefields. The closest one to them was in the rock heaven. According to legends, an earth-shattering battle took place there 7 to 8 epochs ago. Countless celestial kings were swept up in this battle, and it was truly as brutal as could be. The Rock, the first leader of the Rock Palace and one of the most powerful immortal beasts in the world, was also killed in this battle, Lu Herong said. Just what kind of battle had that been? Even a 9th heaven celestial king had been killed? Moreover, the Rock definitely wasn't an ordinary 9th heaven celestial king. Rather, it was a ruler among celestial kings, and it could be referred to as a super elite among celestial kings. Was this related to the storm of darkness? Ling Han was astonished, and he asked, since so many celestial kings were killed, that ancient battlefield is definitely a land of treasures. Why don't people go there to search for treasures? To say nothing else, there was definitely a mountain of celestial tools, right? Lu Herong shook her head in response. She was extremely respectful toward Ling Han, and she replied, "This is because no one knows where this ancient battlefield is. The chaotic battle between celestial kings warped space and time, and all of the future celestial kings suspect that this ancient battlefield has been pushed into a void that's impossible to access." Ling Han, the Empress, and the others slowly nodded in understanding. Even a single celestial king already possessed the power to crush heaven and earth, much less a battle of countless celestial kings. Moreover, there were even near-invincible celestial kings like the Rock. Then how can we find this ancient battlefield? Ling Han asked with a frown. Lu Herong could only shake her head in response. In reality, the Rock Palace was also keen to find this ancient battlefield so they could search for the rock and perfect some of their inheritances and retrieve some of their rare treasures. Just how astonishing and valuable were the treasures of 9th heaven celestial kings. They could definitely resolve the difficulty that the Rock Palace was currently facing. "I can find it," Small Tower suddenly said. Ling Han was astonished, and he asked, "How do you know its location?" "Because I was also on the battlefield at that time," Small Tower said slowly. Ling Han's head instantly went numb. Small Tower had actually participated in the battle that had killed the Rock? He hurriedly asked, "How was this battle triggered? Who was fighting against whom? What happened in the end? Where are all your questions coming from?" Small Tower said in annoyance. "Can't I be curious?" Ling Han asked with a smile. He was already accustomed to the proud Small Tower becoming angry. Small Tower hesitated for a moment before saying, "All right, since your cultivation has improved, and since you already know some things, it won't hurt to reveal some secrets to you." "Really?" Ling Han asked in slight astonishment. He had thought that Small Tower would remain silent after ridiculing him. "You're already aware that there's another force currently advocating a different cultivation system, and trying to overthrow this heaven and earth," Small Tower said. It didn't speak any nonsense, and it directly cut to the chase. Ling Han answered with a nod. "In fact, the infiltration of this force already started a very long time ago," Small Tower said in a calm voice. "They don't belong to this world, and they've in fact come from another world. However, if you ask me where it is, my answer to you is this: I don't know, either. In the beginning, there was only a single passageway between the two worlds. However, elites couldn't cross this passageway, because it was far too unstable. Moreover, there was also the resistive power of the realm, meaning that elites couldn't stay. Meanwhile, weaker cultivators couldn't withstand the crushing power of the passageway at all. They would be killed in an instant." "Oh, that's right. By elites. I mean 9th heaven celestial kings." Ling Han had been listening quietly, yet upon hearing this, his jaw instantly dropped down. This standard for elites was far too high, no? Even casting one's gaze across the entire celestial realm, few people could satisfy this criterion. In the beginning, none of the powerful beings of the celestial realm worried about this. However, this passageway slowly expanded, and it gradually became stable. Finally, on some day, even 9th heaven celestial kings and 8th heaven celestial kings could cross. However, before the celestial kings of our realm could figure out what was happening, countless elites had already charged over from the other side. At the start, our realm was taken by complete surprise, and countless beings were killed as a result. In fact, millions of celestial kings were killed. Only after several heavenly venerates interfered did the situation finally settle down. The most brutal of these battles occurred in none other than the Rock Heaven. Including the Rock, a total of 17 Ninth Heaven celestial kings were killed. This greatly affected the vitality of the celestial realm. Even after 8 epochs, this vitality still hasn't recovered to the level that it once was at. However, this wasn't the end. The elites from that realm continued to attack the passageway, and they yearned to beat the drums of war to invade our world again. They also had elites at the Heavenly Venerable tier, and they continued to stabilize the passageway to allow even Heavenly Venerates to pass, not just the projections of Heavenly Venerates. From that point onwards, the battle between the two realms has never ceased. We call this the Storm of Darkness. During this time, the Force of Darkness has come up with many methods in an attempt to overthrow our realm. They've infiltrated us with their own cultivation system, and this is one of the many methods. They want to destroy our world from its roots. Moreover, the deity that they believe in is a heavenly venerate from the Force of Darkness. Ling Han was rendered completely speechless. As it turned out, this deity was genuinely a freakish being. Heavenly venerates, these were beings who were transcendent above the regulations of heaven and earth. Ha! Why aren't you speaking? Ling Han asked. He suddenly realized that Small Tower had stopped speaking. Small Tower's voice was extremely calm as it replied, I've already told you everything that I need to tell you. As for the things that I can't tell you, I won't tell you even if you ask. Fine. However, Ling Han was already extremely satisfied. At the very least, he now knew who the enemy was. The Force of Darkness, assailants from another world who were attempting to destroy the entire celestial realm. Why are they doing this? Ling Han asked. Do they want to enslave us? No, Small Tower answered. Its voice was solemn and filled with seriousness as it continued. This is a battle between two realms. If we lose, the other realm will engulf us. As for the beings of this realm, they'll all disintegrate and turn into ashes. Even the traces of their memories will be extinguished, and it'll be as if this realm never existed. Ling Han's hair stood on ends. This wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 people dying. Rather, this was a matter of their entire realm being wiped out of existence. This couldn't happen. This definitely couldn't happen. Let's go. We can't let them obtain the source power of heaven and earth no matter what. Chapter 21:10. The True Rock Heaven. Lu Herong had a mysterious feeling of trust for Ling Han, and when he said that he could find the ancient battlefield, she didn't feel the slightest hint of doubt at all. She directly followed his lead. When entering the Rock Heaven, they didn't forget to release Chen Xuangshuang. She would return to the Heavenly Saint Palace by herself. Accompanying Ling Han and the others would be far too dangerous. However, if she were by herself, no one would pay attention to her at all. Ling Han also wanted to immediately go to the Heavenly Saint Palace to visit his son. However, if the Force of Darkness managed to obtain the source power of heaven and earth, and used it to expand and stabilize the two realms' passageway, the celestial realm would tread one step closer to destruction. Can't we also invade that realm? Ling Han asked. Since that realm could assault them, why couldn't the elites of the celestial realm launch a counterattack on that realm? Because they're more powerful. Small Tower replied. This was a simple and clear-cut answer. Regardless of where one was, might would always be right. Just how powerful are they? Ling Han asked. In our world, there can only be a maximum of 4 heavenly venerates at any one time. Currently, there are 3 heavenly venerates. In that world, there are a total of 7 heavenly venerates. Small Tower replied. This was the brutal truth. 7 heavenly venerates. The gulf between their battle prowess was far too great. Ling Han immediately shut up. If he wanted to save the celestial realm from danger, his only option was to become a heavenly venerate. Otherwise, even 9th Heaven celestial kings were only cannon fodder. They couldn't even withstand a single strike from heavenly venerates. Are heavenly venerates truly this powerful? He asked in curiosity. Perhaps 10 9th Heaven celestial kings can block a single heavenly venerate. Moreover, they need to be the most top-notch 9th Heaven celestial kings. Small Tower pondered for a moment before adding, take note, they can only block the heavenly venerate, not rival the heavenly venerate. 9th Heaven celestial kings could stand shoulder to shoulder with heaven and earth, while heavenly venerates were beings who were transcendent above heaven and earth. They weren't subject to the restrictions of heaven and earth. In other words, even if this heaven and earth is destroyed, the heavenly venerates won't be killed? Ling Han suddenly asked. Correct, Small Tower said with a nod. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder Small Tower and the large black dog would occasionally grumble about those old geezers not caring about the beings in this world. In reality, they wouldn't be killed even if calamity befell the world. In fact, they could continue to enjoy an extravagant lifestyle in the other realm. That being the case, they naturally wouldn't fight with their lives on the line. Stop, it's right here, Small Tower suddenly said. Stop, stop, stop. Ling Han hurriedly shouted. Lu Herong stopped and let everyone down. Here, she asked in slight surprise. This was a harsh expanse of land, and there wasn't even a single pebble in sight. How could the ancient battlefield be here? Small Tower? Ling Han asked in his mind. There. Small Tower said as it pointed in a certain direction. After walking for a while, they came to a stop. The surroundings were still bare. Idiot! I already told you that the ancient battlefield has been pushed into the void. Only a passageway remains here, and one can enter this passageway to find that ancient battlefield. Yeah. Xiaogu suddenly called. Ling Han knew that if Xiaogu wasn't mimicking someone, he would only speak if he was enraged. If he was enraged, this often signified the presence of a cultivator who had adopted the other cultivation system. Force of darkness. The celestial king bone inside Xiaogu's body started to glow. One after another, numerous brilliant symbols lit up on his chest. He reached forward and tore at the voids. This was clearly empty space, yet under Xiaogu's hands, it was as if there genuinely was a wall that was being torn down. Lu Herong squinted her eyes, and said, Regulations of space. Apart from celestial kings who had obtained Tao by practicing the regulations of space, ordinary celestial kings would only have enough time and resources to practice other great Tao after reaching the ninth heaven. Those from the Rock Palace naturally cultivated the regulations of space, since they all possessed the bloodline of the rock. Moreover, they possessed the corresponding cultivation techniques and secret techniques, and this was also a reason why they were so powerful. The regulations of space were more powerful than other regulations. However, Lu Herong was shocked to discover that she couldn't understand Xiaogu's regulations of space at all. This signified that Xiaogu's cultivation level was higher. She was extremely curious at this moment. While he was alive, which celestial king had Xiaogu been? After a brief moment, Xiaogu had already forcefully torn open a passageway to the void. The space of the celestial realm was initially extremely stable. Even intense battles between ascending origin tier elites could barely open a passageway to the void. However, Xiaogu had succeeded. Yeah. Xiaogu shouted with an expression of fury. With a leap, he directly entered the passageway. Lu Herong only hesitated for a brief moment before grabbing everyone and venturing inside. It wasn't long before the entrance to the passageway started to slowly knit back together. It was as if it had never existed. Heaven and earth possessed a powerful recovery ability. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, waves of energy chaotically surged about. There was indeed no physical matter in the void. However, there were waves of chaotic energy everywhere, and these waves of energy formed a terrifying gale. Even ascending origin tier elites would be instantly torn into shreds by this gale. Fortunately, they had the protection of a celestial king. Their safety could be guaranteed. Xiaogu was leading them, and his body transformed into a streak of light as his speed grew quicker and quicker. In fact, even Lu Herong started to struggle to keep up. He was merely a bone, yet his might was still so overwhelming. This was incredibly astonishing. While alive, just how powerful had this celestial king been? Fortunately, Lu Herong was a celestial king who was skilled in the regulations of space. Otherwise, if it were any other fourth heaven celestial king, they definitely wouldn't be able to keep up with Xiaogu. However, even with the incredible speed of the two celestial kings, they still spent an entire 7 days and 7 nights flying through the void. Only then did a small dot finally appear in their sight. There was actually something in the void. Moreover, it hadn't been obliterated. After flying for another half a day, the small dot finally started to continually expand in size. It went from a small dot to a pancake, and finally from a pancake to an indescribably large continent. This is the true rock heaven, Lu Herong exclaimed in astonishment. During that battle, the entire rock heaven had been pushed into the void. The current rock heaven had been rebuilt on an expanse of ruined land. This was a heavenly realm, so it was naturally exorbitantly large. Even a celestial king couldn't capture this entire continent with their gaze. Whoosh! Xiao Gu was the first to land on the continent, and Lu Herong hurriedly followed behind him. Ha! Ling Han and the others were astonished to discover that there was no chaotic gale here. This continent has blocked the energy gale. Far too many celestial kings died here during that battle, and this place is a mass graveyard for celestial kings. Indeed, this place was a graveyard for celestial kings. Countless celestial kings were buried here, and their existence gave birth to countless possibilities. Xiao Gu descended into a state of confusion. Because there had been no other matter in the void, the power of darkness had been as clear as the sun. After arriving here, however, the aura of celestial kings blotted out the sun. This caused him to lose his lead. Then we'll search slowly, Ling Han said with a smile. However, just how difficult would it be to find a few people on such a vast continent? Try to cover every corner possible. Once I sense the source power of heaven and earth, I can naturally find the members of the force of darkness, Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded in understanding. This was their only option. They started to wander around the continent. Fortunately, there was a celestial king with them, so their speed was incredibly high. However, if they wanted to search every corner of the continent, this naturally couldn't be done in a single sweep. They would need to sweep around billions of times. After 3 entire years, Small Tower suddenly shouted, "Stop!" Chapter 21:11. More than one. Ling Han had waited for this word for heaven knew how long. Upon hearing it, he hurriedly shouted, "Senior, it's right here." Lu Herong immediately came to a stop. A valley appeared before them, and this was a valley that was brimming with murderous aura. "It's most likely here," Lu Herong said with a nod. She was born after that chaotic battle, so she had only heard about it from the elders in the Rock Palace. She naturally wouldn't have any impressions of this place. However, the murderous aura in this place had almost become tangible. Either a great number of people or a heaven-defyingly powerful elite had died here. Otherwise, the murderous aura definitely couldn't be so overwhelming. Be careful. The force of darkness had already arrived here long ago. In fact, they might have even set up a formation that could slay celestial kings. Thus, they naturally had to be careful. The Black Dragon King was definitely at the celestial king tier, and they were simply unsure about which heaven he was at. Xiao Gu led the way, while Lu Herong protected the rear, keeping Ling Han, Hunyou, the Empress, and Bewitching Maiden Rose safe. As for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, she wouldn't participate in this adventure. It's a shame that the detestable dog isn't here. Otherwise, our victory would be almost certain, Ling Han said with slight pity. The large black dog had been able to steal Celestial King Ling Miao's underwear, so he was either an 8th Heaven Celestial King or a 9th Heaven Celestial King. With such strength, he could essentially do whatever he wanted in the celestial realm. Upon entering the valley, it was inevitable that they ruined the previously stable atmosphere. Murderous aura instantly surged toward them, transforming into a sword as it slashed down at them. Shatter! Lu Herong launched a palm strike, and with the power of regulations, a gigantic light symbol formed before her, slapping at the sword. Pang! There was a dull thud as the sword was shattered into smithereens. Meanwhile, the light symbol continued to surge forward. Pang pang pang! The murderous aura in its path was crushed, and only after striking the mountain did the light symbol finally come to a halt. This 4th Heaven Celestial King was powerful. However, Lu Herong didn't look happy at all. She had indeed blocked this attack with ease. However, this had only been a casually formed burst of murderous aura, yet it could already rival the attack of a 1st Heaven Celestial King. She couldn't let her guard down. Otherwise, they might be taken by surprise and fall into a perilous situation. Damn it! The strong winds have come again. Ling Han suddenly shouted in astonishment. After staying on this continent for 3 years, they were already extremely familiar with the environment here. Every 10 days or so, strong winds would rage through the continent. If this were in the outside world, such strong winds wouldn't pose much of a problem. With Lu Herong and Xiao Gu's protection, they could easily endure this strong wind. However, things were different in this valley. The murderous aura here was far too terrifying, and even the smallest wisp of murderous aura would possess devastating destructive power. After it was riled by the strong winds, even ninth heaven celestial kings would frown at its power. Anyhow, the birth of these strong winds was because this continent was located in the void that was surrounded by storms of energy. Even though things were much better on the continent, they still had to face these strong and destructive winds once every 10 days. At this moment, a wall of wind that measured a whopping 3,000 meters in height violently surged over. It was as if this wall of wind would obliterate anything and everything in its path. That cave! Hurry! There was a cave in the mountainside, and its mere existence signified that it had endured heaven knew how many waves of these strong and destructive winds. This time would be no different. They hurriedly dashed into the cave. In just a moment, the wall of wind was already upon them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The murderous aura transformed into all kinds of weapons, violently tearing at the surroundings. Gashes started to appear on the mountainside, yet surprisingly, the valley wasn't flattened and destroyed. This is purely a windstorm of regulations. It doesn't possess much power, Lu Herong explained. If this windstorm only possessed regulations, it would be most destructive toward life forms. However, it would be a completely different story for inanimate objects. This was analogous to how a drop of poison could easily kill someone, but if it were dripped onto stone, there would be no effect at all. There were only gashes on the mountain wall because of the force of the strong winds. Of course, this valley was definitely as sturdy as could be due to the existence of the murderous aura. It was only because there were wisps of murderous aura in the strong winds that the winds could even leave gashes in the mountain. Otherwise, the winds would do absolutely nothing to the mountains. Blades of wind slashed into the cave, yet they were all easily blocked by Lu Herong and Xiao Gu. They didn't face much danger. However, the strong winds continued, and the blades of wind also continued to rush into the cave. It was as if tens of thousands of first heaven celestial kings were attacking them in unison. If it weren't for the humongous gulf between each heaven of the celestial king tier, Lu Herong and Xiao Gu would have definitely been overwhelmed by these blades of wind. After an hour, the strong winds finally calmed down. They would only rise again in 10 days. They left the cave, only to see that the valley had already returned to a state of calm. Murderous aura continued to swarm, and it was as if it were steam. When they walked out, the murderous aura in the valley immediately reacted, transforming into sabers and swords that slashed over. However, they were all easily blocked by Lu Herong. The valley was colossal, and the group could see traces of battle everywhere. This valley actually wasn't obliterated by the chaotic battle between the celestial kings? Ling Han asked in curiosity. This place is the Azure Origin Valley, Lu Herong said after pondering for a moment. According to rumors, a powerful figure refined their source treasure here. Thus, the entire valley was refined by a paramount regulation. Even if a ninth heaven celestial king attacks this valley with all their might, they can only shatter a few stones. Powerful figure? Ling Han asked. Heh. Lu Herong didn't explain. Heavenly venerate, right? Ling Han thought in his mind. Otherwise, how could a ninth heaven celestial king only manage to shatter a few stones? Hang on. Small Tower suddenly shouted. It faltered for a moment before saying, "Why is this source power of heaven and earth so strange? Perhaps it's been damaged by the force of darkness?" Impossible. Small Tower said as it swayed from side to side. Their aim isn't to damage the source power of heaven and earth. Instead, they want to use the source power of heaven and earth to corrode and weaken the passageway between the two realms. As such, damaging the source power of heaven and earth will be completely pointless. Then what's wrong? Ling Han asked in curiosity. Unless. Small Tower's voice was surprisingly filled with emotion. What did you figure out? You have to realize, source powers of heaven and earth are limited in number. Moreover, some source powers of heaven and earth are able to achieve Tao by themselves and become celestial kings. Small Tower suddenly started to talk about unrelated matters. Ling Han nodded and said, "I know about this. However, even so, of 1,000 celestial kings, perhaps only one possesses a source power of heaven and earth," Small Tower continued. Celestial tools were also rare. Yet around 1 in 10 celestial kings would possess a celestial tool. Source powers of heaven and earth were even rarer, and only around 1 in 1,000 celestial kings would possess them. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. You're saying that tens of thousands of celestial kings died back then, so at least 10 source powers of heaven and earth would have also died with them. After countless years of nurturing, these source powers of heaven and earth should have already been reborn. Ling Han didn't know whether reborn was the right word to use. However, this was the word that he found fitting. That's right, Small Tower replied. In a rare turn of events, Small Tower didn't tease Ling Han. Instead, it started to sway about with a solemn expression. This was Small Tower nodding its head. Ling Han's expression also changed. 10 source powers of heaven and earth. If they allowed the force of darkness to obtain 10 source powers of heaven and earth at once, just how much damage would be caused to this heaven and earth? No wonder Ascent Route Island had only been guarded by an ascending origin tier elite, while this continent was being guarded by a celestial king. There were 10 source powers of heaven and earth. Perhaps there was 1 or 2 more than this, or perhaps there was 1 or 2 fewer than this. They definitely couldn't allow the force of darkness to succeed. Chapter 21:12 Celestial Bell. Ling Han's heart thumped against his chest. If the elements of the source powers of heaven and earth were all different, it was extremely likely that he could obtain the 9 source powers of heaven and earth he needed at once. He could then create 9 divided souls, which would allow him to ascend to the immortal palace tier in the strongest manner possible. If he succeeded, he would most likely be no weaker than Ji Wuming. This is a huge deal, Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. Moreover, not only could he obtain source powers of heaven and earth, but even Hu Niu and the Empress could obtain 1 to 2 source powers of heaven and earth each. At that time, their battle prowess would also rise explosively. He voiced these thoughts to Hu Niu and the Empress, and their heartbeats also involuntarily quickened. Obtaining source powers of heaven and earth was a matter of fate. Most importantly, however, if one couldn't even come across source powers of heaven and earth, how could they test their fate? Stinky Bone. Hurry up! Hu Niu immediately shouted in impatience. Xiao Gu was leading the way, and upon hearing this, he involuntarily turned around and repeated, Stinky Bone. Hurry up! Whoosh! Before he had even finished speaking, a gust of wind swept over and chopped his head off. However, he surprisingly continued to speak even as his head fell to the ground. This was an uncanny sight, and it was enough to make one's hair stand on ends. At the same time, however, it also made them want to laugh. Xiao Gu blocked the blade of wind with one hand, and he picked up his head, and casually placed it back on his neck with another. While he did this, his advance didn't falter at all. Look! As they walked past a canyon, a green bell suddenly appeared before them. This green bell was extremely large, and it measured 9 meters in height and 6 meters in circumference. Judging from its appearance, it was most likely forged from bronze. Right now, its surface was filled with green rust, and it was radiating with an aura of ancient age. With just a glance, Ling Han and the others all felt an overwhelming pressure washing over them. Their bodies became weak, and they could barely remain standing. Celestial King Tool! Lu Herong exclaimed. The Rock Palace was a powerful force, so even with its dire situation right now, she could still possess a celestial tool. However, celestial tools were limited by the cultivation level of their owner, and they were also dependent on the skill level of their creator. She had refined her own celestial tool, and when it was activated, it could even unleash a might that surpassed that of hers. It was because of this that celestial tools were so valuable. However, standing before the bronze bell, Lu Herong instantly felt as if she would be obliterated by a single shake of the bell. Even though this was only a feeling, Lu Herong firmly believed in her senses. Not only was this bell a celestial tool, but it was even a celestial tool above the 7th heaven. Otherwise, it couldn't exert such overwhelming pressure on her. Apart from Xiao Gu, they all felt a strong urge to obtain this bell. After all, celestial king tools were far too valuable. However, to say nothing of the others, even Lu Herong didn't dare to near the bell at all. They could only stare at it from afar. This caused them to feel extremely exasperated. Such a valuable treasure was sitting right before their eyes. They walked around, trying to better observe the celestial tool. However, after taking 2 steps, they were astounded by what they saw. This bronze bell was actually damaged. This was especially clear from the side. There was a hole on the bell, a hole that ran all the way from one end to the other. This hole was caused by a punch, Lu Herong suddenly said. Her face then became pale. This was far too terrifying. Not only had this person's fist rivaled a celestial tool, but it had even penetrated it. What was divine metal? This was the strongest material in the world. Even celestial kings couldn't damage divine metal with their bare hands. If they wanted to damage it, they had to rely on the power of regulations to refine it. Celestial tools that were forged from divine metal also maintained this property. However, reality was sitting right before them. Celestial tools could also be penetrated by bare fists. This is the Bell of Time, the celestial tool of the eternal celestial king. Lu Herong yelped in astonishment. The eternal celestial king had been a paramount ninth heaven celestial king who had lived for heaven knew how many epochs. Originally, he could have lived for countless more epochs. However, 8 epochs ago, he suddenly vanished without a trace. Now, his celestial tool had appeared before them, and it had more so been damaged. What did this signify? The eternal celestial king had already been killed 8 epochs ago. Not only was the ancestral rock killed here, but even the eternal celestial king was killed here, Lu Herong said with emotion. There was confusion and daze in her voice. The ancestral rock, the eternal celestial king, and the previous leader of the rock palace had all been ninth heaven celestial kings. Moreover, they had all been paramount among the celestial kings. However, what did this matter? They had still died in the end. For what reason was she cultivating? Even ninth heaven celestial kings appeared no less vulnerable than her. Even the celestial tool of a ninth heaven celestial king was penetrated by a single punch. The power of this person, Ling Han murmured. Heavenly Venerate. The Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching Maiden Ro exclaimed in unison. Only heavenly venerates could possess such mystical power. No wonder the force of darkness didn't take this celestial tool. Even though it's damaged, it's still a paramount treasure. Because the martial intent of the ninth heaven celestial king still remains, no one below the level of 8th heaven celestial king can hope to obtain it, Ling Han said with a nod. In other words, the celestial king here is definitely below the 8th heaven, the Empress added. This could be guaranteed. However, this didn't make them feel any easier. Even if they were a 5th heaven, 6th heaven, or 7th heaven celestial king, they could still easily suppress Lu Herong. The only unknown factor was Xiao Gu. No one knew what his limit was. Let's go, Lu Herong said. She had already come to her senses. The enemy was right before them, so how could she hesitate now? If she became a 9th heaven celestial king, she could resolve the challenging situation that the rock palace was currently in. This was her motivation to become stronger. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew by, and as it traveled through the hole in the bronze bell, it made the sound of ghosts wailing. The gust of wind then took form, transforming into a man who was dressed in green. He was handsome and mighty, and he more so possessed an indescribable demeanor that made one want to yield. The man in green swept his gaze across Ling Han and the others. His eyes were like divine swords, and they possessed a peerless divine might. Lu Herong hurriedly stepped forward. Wang! A sword appeared in her hands, and the symbols on them all lit up in unison. Whoosh! She rapidly retreated, taking Ling Han and the others with her. In the blink of an eye, she had already retreated hundreds of meters, all the way to the mountainside. A gust of wind had traveled past the bronze bell, transforming into the figure of a person. Afterward, a single glance from this person had forced a mighty 4th heaven celestial king to retreat in haste. Gasp! This was far too incredible. My respects to this senior. Lu Herong respectfully greeted the man with her hand still on the hilt of her sword. This was most likely the eternal celestial king, the owner of the bronze bell. Of course, this figure was merely formed from the martial intent left in the bell. The eternal celestial king had already died several epochs ago. The man in green wore a dazed expression, and he appeared slightly confused and perplexed. Ling Han instantly came to a realization. The Bell of Time had naturally been forged by the eternal celestial king. Thus, its tool spirit was also born from the eternal celestial king's intent. As such, even though the eternal celestial king had already been dead for several epochs, it was still able to form his figure and replicate some of his might. However, because the celestial tool had been damaged, the tool spirit had most likely been crippled as well. Because of this, the figure that it created was also in a dazed state. Wang! At this moment, Xueqi suddenly started to glow. It was the celestial bone. Old bone demon, the man in green suddenly exclaimed. Clarity instantly returned to his eyes. Chapter 21:13 Black Dragon King. Old bone demon, Xueqi said with enthusiasm. He always enjoyed finding a new person to mimic. There was astonishing brilliance in the man's eyes as he swept his gaze over Xueqi again and again. In the end he sighed in sadness saying, "So you've also died." "So you've also died," Xueqi said with a sigh. This was indeed correct. The eternal celestial king had indeed died several epochs ago. However, Ling Han and the others all knew that Xueqi was simply mimicking the man in green, so they couldn't help but find this slightly amusing. One of them was the remnant intent of a celestial tool, while one of them was simply a celestial king bone. When they sighed with emotion, Ling Han and the others couldn't help but find it slightly strange. The man in green squinted as he counted with his fingers. After a moment he said, "So it's already been this long." This was a dead person talking about how long he had already been dead. This was becoming stranger and stranger. "Senior, you've already been dead for so long, so why don't you give this bell to me?" Ling Han said. Upon hearing this, Lu Hairong's hair instantly stood on ends. She was given a huge fright. This was a ninth heaven celestial king. Even though he had already been dead for countless years, his might still existed. Thus, they had to treat him with utmost respect. Yet, Ling Han actually dared to ask for his celestial tool. He was truly courageous. He was also fairly shameless. The man in green faltered for a moment before roaring with laughter. "I died countless years ago, and this wisp of aura is only a remnant intent that hasn't dissipated yet. Now that I've awoken, this aura will dissipate in at most a dozen days. Fine. I'll bestow this bell of time upon you." Fuck. He truly gave it away. Lu Hairong couldn't help but feel slightly regretful. If she had known this, she would have definitely asked first. Even though the bell of time was damaged, it was still a celestial tool that had been forged by a ninth heaven celestial king. No matter what, it still possessed the might of seventh heaven or eighth heaven celestial kings. "Young girl, you don't possess such fortune, so there's no need to feel regret," the man in green said in an indifferent voice. It was as if he knew what Lu Hairong was thinking. Lu Hairong couldn't help but feel astounded. She was a fourth heaven celestial king. Her emotions didn't show on her face, yet before this man, she couldn't hide them at all. His eyes were far too sharp. Ha! This young girl. A look of realization spread across the man's face as he gazed at Hunyeo, and he said, "You're the seventh disciple of Brother Rock, correct? However, the symbol on your divine sense is damaged, and it seems neither human nor matter. You're not the same person as before." As expected of a ninth heaven celestial king, nothing could escape his observation. This was even though he was only a remnant intent. "Senior, you sacrificed yourself while resisting the force of darkness, yet right now, the people from the force of darkness are still trying to extract the source power of heaven and earth from this continent. They want to damage the defenses of this heaven and earth. Senior, please help us," Ling Han said with a bow. They weren't sure about the Black Dragon King's cultivation, so what would they do if he were above the fourth heaven? If that were the case, Lu Hairong would simply be seeking death. The man in green was the eternal celestial king's remnant intent, so they might as well treat him as the eternal celestial king. Anger spread across his face, and he said, "These devils from the outside realm. They still haven't given up yet." Boom! Divine light exploded from his body, illuminating the entire void. "Farewell, senior," Lu Hairong said with a bow. This was genuinely going to be the eternal celestial king's final battle. Heaven and earth had their regulations, and when one died, their Tao would also vanish. This wisp of divine sense had only remained for several epochs thanks to the existence of the celestial tool. Once it unleashed its might, however, it would exhaust its power and vanish once and for all. "Farewell, senior." Ling Han and the others also bowed respectfully. The celestial kings who had battled to death here were all deserving of their utmost respect. They were worthy of being remembered forever. Farewell, senior, Xueqi said too. He mimicked what he saw. The eternal celestial king was rendered speechless. While alive, he and Xueqi had shared the same status. Before they had achieved Tao, Xueqi had even enjoyed a higher status than him. Now, however, Xueqi was actually referring to him as senior. This naturally made him feel extremely exasperated. However, he wasn't in the mood to reminisce with Xueqi right now. His final flames had already started to burn. Whoosh! A figure suddenly dashed over, bringing with them boundless darkness. This was a woman who looked to be around 30 years old. Her figure was shapely, and her skin was smooth and jade-like. Her hair was tied into a bun, and as she looked over them, her gaze was as sharp as could be. So it's just a few insects, she said with a sneer. A black dragon rose behind her, brandishing its 4 claws and radiating with a terrifying aura. Is this the Black Dragon King? There was no brilliant light around her, so it was impossible to determine her cultivation level. Bishi, the eternal celestial king said with astonishment. You actually didn't die. Moreover, you've defected to darkness. Bishi. Ling Han and the others were astounded upon hearing this. The first dragon in the world was called the Origin Dragon, and the Origin Dragon had given birth to 9 children. The 7th was none other than Bishi. However, they hadn't imagined that Bishi was actually a female. The Black Dragon King started to laugh in a wanton manner. This wasn't an arrogant laugh, and it was instead a crazed laugh. She glared at the eternal celestial king with a baleful expression as she said, When I was captured by Lord Mo Fu back then, which of you came to rescue me? To say nothing of you people. Even my father abandoned me as if I were nothing. That being the case, why do I need to sacrifice myself for this world? I'm going to annihilate this world with my own hands. The eternal celestial king was extremely resolute, and he immediately charged forward upon hearing this. Since that's the case, I have nothing else to say to you. He didn't utter any nonsense about dragging her back onto their side. First of all, her hate was far too deep-rooted, so she couldn't be persuaded at all. Second of all, he didn't have the time to do so. Pang! The Black Dragon King launched a punch, which transformed into a colossal dragon claw as it bore down on the eternal celestial king. A black lotus blossomed above the head of the dragon behind her, and it radiated with an extremely sinister aura. 16th Lotus. Ling Han knew that the 9th lotus of this force corresponded to the ascending origin tier. That being the case, what did the 16th lotus correspond to? Pang! The attacks of the eternal celestial king and the Black Dragon King collided, causing both of them to shudder and retreat thousands of kilometers. However, with a single stride, they immediately charged forward and collided again, continuing their intense battle. Pang pang pang. The sound of their collisions was like torrential rain, and to everyone's shock, the Black Dragon King wasn't being suppressed at all. If you were still in your strongest state, I would indeed be no match for you. However, you're merely a remnant divine sense at this moment, and you can only unleash the power of an 8th heaven celestial king. Even though I'm only a 7th heaven celestial king, I possess the magnificent power bestowed upon me by Lord Mo Fu. Because of this, I'm no weaker than you, the Black Dragon King said with pride. My physique is present, and my divine sense is also intact, meaning that I can battle like this forever. However, what about you? You're at the end of your journey, and your power might vanish at any moment. The eternal celestial king didn't reply. Instead, he simply attacked with his full might. With a roar, a semi-transparent blade appeared in his hands. This blade shone with the radiance of time. He had formed this blade using the regulations of time. If one were struck, their body would be torn apart by the power of time. Some parts would be tossed 700 years into the past, while some parts might be thrown 100,000 years into the past. Some parts might even be sent back to 3 epochs ago. His opponent wasn't wrong. He indeed didn't have long. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon King could still battle forever. This was an inherently unfair battle. Ling Han's heart thumped against his chest. He hadn't imagined that the force of darkness would view this place with such great importance. They had deployed a 16th Lotus Elite, one whose cultivation level could rival 7th Heaven Celestial Kings and whose battle prowess could rival 8th Heaven Celestial Kings. It was commonly said that advancing to each level in the Celestial King tier was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Just what kind of power had Lord Mo Fu bestowed upon the Black Dragon King? She could actually overcome the difference of one heaven. Was the force of darkness truly so terrifying? Moreover, this would also entice many more people to descend into darkness. Chapter 21:14. Two Great Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. Yeah. Xueqi faltered for a moment before killing intent suddenly flooded his eyes. This was the power of darkness. This was his mortal enemy. Boom! Brilliant light radiated from his Celestial King bone, and numerous symbols pulsated as they soared into the sky. In fact, even the chaotic winds above the continent were ripped apart by these symbols, unable to wreak chaos any longer. Die! Xueqi wore an expression of wild rage as he charged at the Black Dragon King. Ha! A surprised expression spread across the Black Dragon King's face. She hadn't paid any heed to Ling Han and the others before. After all, only the Eternal Celestial King was worthy of being considered as her opponent. Now that Xueqi was unleashing his rage, however, she was surprised to sense a powerful aura that she couldn't ignore. Ha! Old Bone Demon, you're finally going to unleash your might? The Eternal Celestial King said with a loud laugh. Yeah. Xueqi had no interest in mimicking others at this moment. He reached into his body, pulling out his Celestial King bone, and swinging it at the Black Dragon King. Old Bone Demon? The Black Dragon King murmured with a frown. Realization suddenly struck her, and she exclaimed, "You're the Bone Demon Celestial King." Apprehension spread across her face. The Bone Demon Celestial King enjoyed an equal standing with the Eternal Celestial King, but he had attained Tao even earlier. According to rumors, he was genuinely a bone that had gained awareness and intelligence. In the end, he had become a Celestial King. Thus, even though Xueqi was in an unintelligent state at this moment, as long as that Celestial King bone existed, no one would dare to underestimate him. Boom! Radiant light swirled around the Celestial King bone, and dozens of symbols started to light up one after another. Each symbol represented a true meaning of the Great Tao, and any one of them would be powerful enough to crush the sky. If this weren't the void, it was very likely that the heavens would have already been shattered. However, there existed the treasure of a heavenly venerate here, and its toughness was such that even the battle between Xueqi, the Black Dragon King, and the Eternal Celestial King couldn't damage it significantly. They could only shatter some of the boulders and destroy some of the cliffs. Otherwise, the casual attack of a Celestial King could easily obliterate such a valley, transforming it into a vast sea or even an expanse of void. The Black Dragon King roared with laughter, and said, "Let me spar with the two renowned Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings who could once rival the might of my father." A lotus with 16 petals bloomed between her brows, causing a dark aura to instantly radiate from her body. At this moment, she seemed wholly incompatible with this continent. "Dark destruction wave of the Black Dragon," she roared. She threw a punch, unleashing a burst of black light that transformed into a dark dragon head that snapped its jaws at Xueqi and the Eternal Celestial King. When the dragon head neared them, it suddenly widened its jaws and breathed out a black lotus. A boundless destructive aura instantly permeated the surroundings, and it was as if it were about to annihilate the entire world. The Eternal Celestial King and Xueqi both counterattacked with their full might. Pang pang pang. They both unleashed powerful celestial techniques to attack the Black Lotus. However, the Black Lotus was a terrifying existence, and it was as if it were an independent realm itself. It could neither be blocked nor destroyed. To their surprise, it continued to slowly crash down upon the Eternal Celestial King and Xueqi. Ha! What Ninth Heaven Celestial King? Before the power of darkness, you're nothing but trash, the Black Dragon King said with laughter. She made a tapping motion at the Black Lotus, providing it with more energy. "Bell of Time, come!" the Eternal Celestial King roared. Wang! The large bronze bell in the valley immediately rang in reply, shooting into the sky, and flying toward the Eternal Celestial King. "Song of the Ages," he cried. He then pointed at the Bell of Time. Ring! The ring of the bell reverberated through the void. Ring, ring, ring. The bell rang several more times, with some rings coming from the past, and some rings coming from the future. The Eternal Celestial King was a celestial king who had grasped the regulations of time. He had also cultivated this regulation to the paramount level, allowing him to alter the past and influence the future. Wang! A passageway was opened in the void, from which a man in azure flew out. This was another Eternal Celestial King. This was the Eternal Celestial King from another time. This was the Eternal Celestial King from 8 epochs ago before he had died. Using the Bell of Time as a medium, the current Eternal Celestial King had forcefully summoned himself from the past. This was an existence from the past, so it naturally couldn't stay in the present for long. However, that was a genuine 9th Heaven Celestial King. If he unleashed his full power, he could easily kill an 8th Heaven Celestial King within a few exchanges. Song of the Ages. Perhaps this celestial technique was passed down from the Eternal Celestial King? The Black Dragon King's expression instantly changed. She definitely couldn't allow this celestial king of the past to arrive. Otherwise, her fate could only be death. With a loud roar, scales instantly materialized over her body as she transformed into a dragon. She then violently swiped her claw at the passageway of time. Pang! A devastating power swept past, instantly obliterating the passageway of time. The Eternal Celestial King involuntarily frowned. He was far too weak at this moment, while his existence of the past was far too powerful. This resulted in his existence of the past being incredibly difficult and slow to summon. With the interference of the Black Dragon King, his passageway of time was more so directly destroyed. Is that all you've got? The Black Dragon King asked with a wanton laugh. 2 once powerful 9th Heaven Celestial Kings were now painfully struggling before her. This caused her to feel extremely smug. What did it matter that they were once paramount and lofty? Right now, they could only suffer at her hands. I'll send you on your way. The Black Dragon King swooped through the air, stepping on a black lotus with 16 petals that was radiating with a violent destructive aura. At this moment, she was seemingly invincible. Yeah. Xiao Gu was furious, yet his power could only reach the 8th heaven. In fact, it was even slightly weaker. Thus, he naturally couldn't suppress the Black Dragon King. Meanwhile, the Eternal Celestial King was more so only a shell of his former self. His remnant divine sense was about to die out at any moment. Their defeat was already set in stone. Retreat! Lu Herong resolutely commanded. If they waited for the Black Dragon King to defeat the 2 Celestial Kings, their only fate would be death. How could they rival a 7th Heaven Celestial King? Moreover, this was a 7th Heaven Celestial King who possessed the battle prowess of an 8th Heaven Celestial King. You guys leave first. Ling Han shouted. After pondering for a moment, he immediately made a decision. He couldn't abandon those source powers of heaven and earth. First of all, they could allow him to become more powerful. Second of all, if those source powers fell into the hands of the force of darkness, they would draw another step closer to a full-scale invasion from the force of darkness. He had to give this a try. Anyhow, his confidence was derived from the existence of the Black Tower. We'll accompany you, the Empress immediately said. No, only if you leave can I go all out, Ling Han said. If the Black Tower unleashed its full power, he believed that its overwhelming might could rival the Black Dragon King or even suppress her. However, it might also attract the attention of those old monsters. Thus, he couldn't have any vulnerabilities around him. The Empress was a resolute person, and she immediately nodded in understanding. She dragged the screaming Hunyou along with her as she leaped toward Lu Herong. Lu Herong didn't try to persuade Ling Han, either. Since he was the successor of that mighty being, it was necessary for him to possess such courage. Moreover, he might also possess the ability to pluck fortune from the flames. Let's go. With a wave of her hand, she immediately grabbed the Empress and the others. She then immediately dashed into the distance. Stinky insects. The Black Dragon King sneered. Their actions didn't escape her gaze, and she immediately launched a casual attack, aiming to kill Lu Herong and the others. However, the Eternal Celestial King obstructed her in a timely manner, immediately blocking her attack. This instant was all Lu Herong needed to tear through the sky and escape into the void. With the chaotic winds raging through the void, even 9th Heaven Celestial Kings wouldn't be able to discover Lu Herong and the others. Small tower. Point me to the source powers of heaven and earth. Ling Han said with a resolute expression. He definitely had to obtain those source powers of heaven and earth. Even if he couldn't obtain them, he had to release them from this void. They definitely couldn't fall into the hands of the Black Dragon King. Follow my guidance, small tower. It was seemingly aware of the gravity of the situation as well, and it surprisingly didn't tease or argue with Ling Han. Instead, it immediately started to guide him toward the source powers of heaven and earth. Chapter 21:15. Two source powers of heaven and earth. Ling Han glanced at the intense battle before resolutely leaving. He couldn't help Xueqi and the eternal celestial king at all. However, if he could find the source powers of heaven and earth and obtain or release them, he could achieve his goal of this trip. As for the Black Dragon King, she was merely another elite. Regardless of how powerful one was, if they weren't a heavenly venerate, their influence on the world was only limited. This was the case even though she was a seventh heaven celestial king. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon King more so wouldn't pay any heed to Ling Han. Anyhow, Lu Herong had already escaped, so she couldn't be bothered paying any more attention to Ling Han. Instead, she would focus her full attention on suppressing Xueqi. The eternal celestial king was already an ancient and dead person, so there was no need to waste any time and effort on him. Boom, boom, boom. The shock waves of battle rippled outward. This was a fierce battle between celestial kings, and it was more so a clash between titans of the pinnacle level. Ling Han silently navigated away, following the guidance of the small tower. However, this was no easy journey. Small Tower's guidance was extremely simple, consisting of nothing more than instructions to go up, down, left, or right. The problem was, however, that there might be obstacles such as mountains before him. How could Ling Han navigate through these obstacles? Ordinary mountains and boulders were naturally no problem. However, where was this? This was a continent where even the intense battle between celestial kings could only cause a limited amount of damage. As such, how could Ling Han possibly damage these mountains and forcefully traverse through them? It would be futile even if he were 10,000 times more powerful. Thus, he could only navigate around these mountains. Sometimes he would go too far, and sometimes he wouldn't go far enough. In any case, he had to take detours here and there, and this gave him a slight headache. He could only say that the terrain of this valley was far too complicated. In fact, he could even regard it as a formation. This was actually extremely likely. After all, this valley was the body of a cauldron, one which was used to refine paramount treasures. As such, was it strange for a formation to exist inside this cauldron? Keep going forward, it's just ahead. A little bit more. We're there. Small Tower exclaimed. A corpse lay before Ling Han. This was a cultivator in purple robes, and there was still a fly whisk in his hands. However, only the bottom half of the fly whisk remained. There was a gaping hole in his chest, a hole that had directly penetrated his heart. Apart from this, there was no other wound on the corpse. This had most likely been a fatal wound. There was a symbol of flames on the cultivator's forehead, and there was also a flower growing from his chest. This flower was as clear and transparent as jade. However, even though the flower was right before his eyes, upon closer inspection, it was as if it didn't exist at all. It was as ethereal as could be. The source power of flames? Ling Han murmured in slight disappointment. He already possessed the 9 heavens flame, so it wouldn't mean much even if he obtained another source power of the fire element. His power would definitely grow, but not by a very significant amount. From his observation, this cultivator had possessed a source power of flames. He had also practiced the regulations of space. Thus, after dying, a celestial medicine of the space element had bloomed from his body. This was a great herb 8 epochs old. This was a fairly good result. He could give the source power of flames to either the Empress or Hun Yo, while they could ingest the great herb together. Nothing would be wasted. That's not the case, Small Tower said. Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking in delight, huh? Perhaps it's a source power of space? Can you use your imagination a little? Small Tower said with a sneer. This cultivator is the well-renowned Purple Fire Celestial King. At that time, he enjoyed the fortune of the heavens, and obtained 2 source powers of heaven and earth. So you're saying, both the symbol of flames and the flower are source powers of heaven and earth? Ling Han asked in surprise and delight. It was indeed a pity that there was no celestial medicine. However, obtaining two source powers of heaven and earth was naturally even more delightful. The flames are the purple spirit flames, while the source power of space is the spiritual void glass, Small Tower explained. The purple spirit flames are used to incinerate one's divine sense, while the spiritual void glass is used to create tens of thousands of clones of oneself. Then let's hurry up and obtain them, Ling Han exclaimed in eager excitement. Same old rules. Channel the indestructible heaven scroll. Whether you can succeed or not, that's all up to your luck. Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He sat down cross-legged. Wang. He started to channel the indestructible heaven scroll, upon which numerous golden symbols materialized on his body. Looking closely, there was even a hint of a 9-colored glow among this gold. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time slowly crept by. However, the two source powers of heaven and earth remained unmoving and unreactive. Ling Han understood that source powers of heaven and earth couldn't be aroused so easily. Right now, however, time was of the essence. Hurry! I beg of you, hurry! Ling Han released his willpower, sending it to approach the dead cultivator. This was an extremely risky move. Even though the Celestial King was already dead, a starving camel was still larger than a horse. As long as their corpse remained intact, they would possess the destructive power to obliterate the world. Could they be approached by a measly dividing soul-tier cultivator? However, Ling Han had no time, so he had no option but to take this risk. Senior, you passed away for the sake of resisting the invasion by the force of darkness. Now, the force of darkness has regathered their forces, launching another assault. They've got their eyes on your two source powers of heaven and earth. If they succeed, that'll be a huge blow to our realm. So, this junior is going to act audaciously in violating your corpse. Please forgive me, Senior. His divine sense continued to advance, entering the most dangerous region. If he advanced any more, he might suffer the wrath of thunder. Should he advance? Of course he should. How could he retreat at such a critical moment? Ling Han gritted his teeth, and advanced another step with his divine sense. There was no reaction. Great! Ling Han's divine sense continued to advance, approaching the cultivator's body. His divine sense then funneled into the corpse. Wang! He entered an all-new world. After reaching the Celestial King tier, a person would essentially become a world of their own. In fact, they could even nurture a small world in their bodies. Where's the purple spirit flames? Where's the spiritual void glass? It's over there. Ling Han's body was still outside, so he could clearly sense the location of the purple spirit flames and the spiritual void glass. Thus, he immediately corrected his direction and advanced toward some place. He was going to look for the spiritual void glass first. Comparing the two, the spiritual void glass was definitely more important. Inside the body of a celestial king, both time and space lost their meaning. Moreover, only Ling Han's divine sense had entered, so this was much like when he cultivated under the reincarnation tree. An instant in the outside world would be tens of thousands of years in this inside world. After heaven knew how long, a valley finally appeared before Ling Han. This valley was fully carved from crystal, and it was condensed into all kinds of shapes and sizes. Ling Han walked inside, only to see a crystal hovering in the air above the center of the valley. It was shimmering with a brilliant radiance. The spiritual void glass. Ling Han walked toward it without any hesitation. His body was formed from his divine sense, so any physical contact would be contact with his divine sense. Wang! The spiritual void glass immediately reacted to his approach, with columns of light soaring into the sky. Strangely, however, he was unable to determine the colors of these columns of light. They were seemingly transparent, yet they were seemingly multicolored at the same time. They were indescribably strange. Come. Time slowly crept by. 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. Whoosh! The spiritual void glass suddenly shot into the sky. What? It's fleeing? Ling Han's divine sense immediately left the cultivator's body, only to see a streak of light shooting into the sky. Fuck! Whoosh! The streak of light drew an arc in the sky before surprisingly turning around and rapidly streaking back. It shot toward Ling Han. Ling Han was delighted, and he immediately removed his defenses, allowing the streak of light to hit him. The streak of light instantly fused into Ling Han's forehead. He had obtained the spiritual void glass, his fifth source power of heaven and earth. Ling Han laughed heartily. However, he had no time to celebrate, and he hurriedly made space in his dantian for this new source power to occupy. Next, it was time to obtain the source power of flames. Chapter 21:16. Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil. With a new source power of space entering his body, it was inevitable that there would be struggle and conflict between the source powers. Fortunately, Ling Han was already accustomed to this kind of conflict. He would allow the 5 source powers to fight to their heart's content before he mediated for them, and acted as peacemaker. Even though the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water had both been extracted from his body, their source was still engraved within him, and they didn't show any signs of wanting to move. After dealing with the spiritual void glass, it was time for him to obtain the purple spirit flames. This was slightly more difficult. This was because Ling Han couldn't absorb this source power. However, he still had to convince this source power of heaven and earth to leave with him. This was an extremely difficult task. Anyhow, he would give it a try. Since it was a source power of heaven and earth, it most likely had some form of sentience. Ling Han adjusted his direction, and arrived at the head of the cultivator. This was a sea of flames. Amid this sea of flames, there was a small dog happily jumping about. The purple spirit flames had actually taken the form of a dog. Had it developed intelligence and become a unique life form? It's only taken the preliminary step of becoming a unique and independent individual. However, it's still a long way off becoming a genuine life form, Small Tower said. In other words, this small dog only has the intelligence of a 2 to 3-year-old child? Ling Han murmured. I can trick it then. He stopped near the sea of flames, saying, Adorable puppy, come over here. Let me have a closer look. Because he was only a divine sense at this moment, his speech was naturally transmitted through his divine sense as well. There was no problem communicating with the dog. Thus, the small dog immediately looked over, cocking its head in hesitation. It's going to be very fun, Ling Han continued with his shady behavior. The small dog took a few steps over before stopping again. It wore an expression of hesitation as it gazed at Ling Han. Come on, come over here. If Ling Han's physical body were here, he would definitely retrieve all kinds of food from the Black Tower to entice the small dog. Now, however, he could only use words to trick it. The small dog stopped and started, and only after a long time did it finally reach the edge of the sea of flames. After arriving here, however, it was extremely reluctant to take another step. Come on, come over here. I also own a large black dog, and you guys might even be acquainted with each other, Ling Han continued. The small dog merely cocked its head as it looked at him. It didn't bark, and it didn't take another step forward, either. Don't be afraid, come on over, Ling Han said as he started to step back. When he retreated a fair distance, the small dog started to become restless. It continued to pace back and forth, occasionally stopping to glance at Ling Han. It was seemingly indecisive about whether it should head over or not. If you don't come now, there won't be another chance, Ling Han said as he continued to retreat. The small dog finally made up its mind, suddenly spreading its legs and sprinting toward Ling Han. Pang! It rammed into Ling Han, causing his mind to shudder. Meanwhile, his divine sense had already been pushed out from the cultivator's body. A ball of flames followed after it, and it crashed toward Ling Han's body. However, Ling Han naturally wouldn't absorb this source power of heaven and earth. Small Tower, he immediately shouted in his mind. Are you sure? Small Tower asked. It knew what Ling Han was thinking. I'm certain, Ling Han answered without hesitation. Wang! A black tower instantly materialized, radiating with a paramount aura. It was as if this tower was heaven and earth. This was a unique existence among heaven and earth. It was the Tower of 3 Realms. The ball of flames instantly ground to a halt. Even though this was only a ball of flames, Ling Han could still feel some kind of willpower emanating from it. It was showing respect and apprehension toward the Black Tower. The Black Tower expanded slightly as it engulfed the ball of flames. With a whoosh, it then vanished as it returned to Ling Han's body. This was an extremely risky action. The Tower of Three Realms was far too powerful, and it had even transcended the level of Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. Thus, its appearance in the world would definitely trigger shockwaves among heaven and earth. Heavenly venerates could easily sense these disturbances. Ling Han only dared to do this because this was in the void. There existed boundless chaotic winds, and they could greatly muffle the shockwaves caused by the Tower of Three Realms. There was a 90% chance that he could avoid the detection of heavenly venerates. If this were an ordinary environment, unless Small Tower could suppress the aura of the Black Tower, Ling Han definitely wouldn't dare to act so rashly. However, since he had a 90% chance of avoiding detection, he was willing to take a gamble. Everything remained calm. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. If a heavenly venerate truly descended, the situation would be futile even if the Black Tower unleashed its full might. "You're wrong," Small Tower said with pride. "If I face them head-on, I'll naturally be no match for them. However, helping you flee will be no problem at all. It's just that you'll become a target of those old folks, and you won't need to think about leaving the Black Tower anymore. Otherwise, your only fate would be death." Ling Han nodded in understanding. If he didn't need to use the Black Tower, it was best that he didn't use it. "Let's go, it's time to look for the next source power of heaven and earth." Small Tower continued to guide him. After a day, they discovered a large boulder. "Is there a celestial king buried underneath?" Ling Han asked. "Wrong. This is the celestial king." Small Tower replied with a sneer. "Ha! It's a rock?" "This is the Azure Rock Celestial King, who was an ordinary rock before attaining Tao. Because he was sat on top of Bai. During his seclusion, he gained awareness and developed intelligence. In the end, he even became a celestial king," Small Tower said. Because he attained Tao as a rock, it was also very easy for him to receive acknowledgement from the source power of Earth. As such, he obtained the Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil. Ling Han raised his hands and asked, "Hang on, you said the Azure Rock Celestial King was sat on top of by whom during their cultivation?" "Fool, we can't speak his name. This person is far too powerful, so speaking his name will instantly grab his attention. Do you want to die?" Small Tower spoke to Ling Han as if he were a retard. "Is he one of the three heavenly venerates?" Ling Han asked. Small Tower didn't ridicule him this time. Ling Han was truly curious. Just who were these three heavenly venerates? However, if he asked, Small Tower would definitely say that he couldn't speak their names or titles. Otherwise, this would grab their attention. With a single thought, these heavenly venerates might even materialize before them. At that time, Ling Han would have no option but to retreat inside the Black Tower and spend the remainder of his life fleeing. Ling Han pushed aside his curiosity. There were more important matters to deal with at this moment. Within this rock was a source power of heaven and earth. This was something he dearly needed right now. He sat down and started to channel the indestructible heaven scroll, attracting the source power of earth inside the rock. The indestructible heaven scroll was far too powerful, being a cultivation technique created by a heavenly venerate, so it possessed a strong ability to attract source powers of heaven and earth. Thus, it wasn't long before the rock started to glow. Thump, thump, thump. It was as if the rock possessed life, and it was as if it possessed a heart that was beating. "Hurry, come over here." Ling Han didn't have much time. The battle between the Black Dragon King, the Eternal Celestial King, and Xiao Gu might end at any moment, and it was possible that the Black Dragon King might appear before him at any time. If that happened, he would either have to retreat inside the Black Tower or be killed. In any case, he would lose the chance to obtain this source power of heaven and earth. 3 days passed, and the entire rock was now glowing. It then became transparent, revealing a 5-colored block of soil in its center. This block of soil continued to transform into all kinds of shapes and figures. Pa! The rock suddenly split apart, and the 5-colored block of soil vigorously dashed into the air before flying toward Ling Han. Pooh! The block of 5-colored soil slammed into Ling Han's head before fusing into his body. Boom! Violent waves instantly surged through Ling Han's dantian. The source powers were fighting against each other again, trying to conquer more land for themselves. Fine. He would continue to act as a peacemaker. Chapter 21:17. My hands are getting tired from this rich harvest. Because he already had a wealth of previous experience, Ling Han was able to easily resolve the conflict between the 6 source powers. They each settled in an area of his dantian. Anyhow, he had finally obtained a source power of each of the 5 elements. His great clash of source powers could now unleash its full might. Stop congratulating yourself, hurry up and get a move on, Small Tower said in impatience. Ling Han nodded in reply. He had no time to investigate the uses of the Black Tortoise Chaos Origin soil as he stood up to leave. Several hours later, they arrived on the bank of a wide river. This was an extraordinary river, in that its contents weren't water. Instead, it was filled with tumultuous lightning. It was obvious that this led to a source power of lightning. Ling Han involuntarily thought of the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. At that time, he had followed a river of lightning before discovering the resting place of his divine sense. How was he doing now? Had he recovered his immortal palace tier cultivation? It would be extremely difficult for him to exact revenge, right? After all, he had seemingly offended an ascending origin tier elite. Regardless of how prodigious the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire was, it would still take him millions of years to reach the ascending origin tier, right? This was taking into account the fact that he was already a prodigy among prodigies. Ling Han rid himself of these random thoughts. The source power of lightning was another source power that he didn't possess. If he obtained it, he would once again grow significantly more powerful. Has anyone obtained 9 source powers before? He suddenly asked in curiosity. Yes, Small Tower replied without any hesitation. Who? The original owner of the Black Tower, Small Tower replied. There was a hint of melancholy in his voice. Ling Han was instantly rendered speechless. It was largely because he practiced the indestructible heaven scroll that he was able to obtain 6 source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if he relied on himself, perhaps he couldn't even obtain a single source power. In comparison, the gulf between him and the original owner of the Black Tower was extremely evident. Don't lose heart, Small Tower said. The heavenly venerate was able to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth simply because he severed his own cultivation after reaching the 9th heaven. Before starting his new life, he had already created the indestructible heaven scroll. Ling Han was astonished upon hearing this. As it turned out, Ji Wuming wasn't the only 9th heaven celestial king to sever his own cultivation. However, this also made him feel much better. At the very least, that person also hadn't been able to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth from the very start. He strode forward, and it wasn't long before he reached the end of the lightning river. A pool of lightning appeared before him, and within it were arcs of crackling blue lightning liquid. Limitless lightning, Small Tower said. Same old rules? Ling Han asked. Ling Han started to absorb the source power. With the indestructible heaven scroll, absorbing source powers of heaven and earth was no difficult task. The problem right now was time. Ling Han didn't have much time to waste. After 9 entire days, Ling Han finally managed to arouse and absorb this source power of heaven and earth. My first 4 source powers of heaven and earth all took exorbitant effort to obtain. Now, however, it's as if I can obtain them with a nod of my head. Say, this comparison makes me feel depressed, Ling Han said with emotion. Stop acting pitiful after you've received a benefit, Small Tower scolded. Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. Anyhow, if one didn't need to, who would want to spend an exorbitant amount of effort? However, things were genuinely far too easy now. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Following the guidance of Small Tower, he started to search for the 5th source power of heaven and earth. After walking for a short while, Ling Han came to a stop. There was a corpse before him. It was extremely normal to come across corpses here. After all, this was an ancient battlefield, so it would be strange if there was no corpse. However, this corpse was extremely peculiar. Even though it was humanoid, its features were extremely strange. It had a pair of cow hooves, and its body was also pitch black and covered in scales. There was a pair of thin cicada wings on its back, and its gigantic eyes almost took up half of its face. Meanwhile, its mouth was as thin and long as the mouth of a mosquito, and it was already beyond what could be called a mouth. Calling it an arthropod's mouthpart would be more fitting. Ling Han had come across beings from numerous races before. Regarding those that could shapeshift, even though they would maintain some features of their race, he definitely hadn't come across anything like this before. This is an elite from the foreign realm, Small Tower suddenly said. Humans from the foreign realm look like this? So ugly, Ling Han remarked. This is an 18th Lotus elite. In order to stop him, our realm dispatched 4 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. However, even so, one of the Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings was still killed, Small Tower said. Simply to stop him? Ling Han asked with a solemn expression. The difficulty of stopping an elite and killing an elite was completely different. If even stopping a person required 4 elites of an equivalent level, especially paramount beings such as Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, just how powerful were the elites from the foreign realm? Yes, simply to stop him, Small Tower replied in a stern voice. You can also appreciate the grave nature of this battle now, right? Is this foreign elite especially powerful, or are they all this powerful? They're all this powerful. Ling Han was genuinely stunned upon hearing this. Those who could become Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings were all top-notch prodigies. Even if there was a gap in abilities between them, this gap shouldn't be large. However, any random elite from the foreign realm could rival 4 elites from the celestial realm. It was no wonder that the celestial realm could only choose to defend, and not counterattack. It was no wonder that they couldn't comprehensively defeat the storm of darkness. Moreover, this is taking into account the fact that the elites from the foreign realm experience suppression from our heaven and earth after entering the celestial realm. Otherwise, they'll be even more powerful. Small Tower revealed an even more brutal fact. Thank heavens. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Thank heavens the celestial realm hadn't counterattacked. Otherwise, they would have faced a one-sided massacre. The ancient realm has been split into 2, the immortal realm and the netherworld. Is this because of the foreign realm? Ling Han suddenly recalled this question that had bothered him for a long time. Yes, but also no, Small Tower replied. This was a confusing answer. Fuck. If it is, then it is. If it isn't, then it isn't. What kind of answer is this? The ancient realm being split into 2 was indeed related to the invasion of the foreign realm. However, that was only a trigger. The fundamental reason was still related to the celestial realm itself, Small Tower explained. What reason is that? Ling Han asked. This involves heavenly venerates, so it's best that you don't ask, Small Tower replied. It refused to answer Ling Han's question. Related to heavenly venerates again. However, this made sense. If not heavenly venerates who had transcended the regulations of heaven and earth, who else could split the ancient realm into 2? Moreover, only at the command of heavenly venerates would the entire celestial realm obey and follow. This was why no one dared to bring those from the ancient realm into the celestial realm. However, there was something else that Ling Han was curious about. What was the reason for this? They were already paramount heavenly venerates, so how could they be afraid of a few people ascending from the ancient realm? However, this involved those 3 old monsters, so Small Tower definitely wouldn't indulge his curiosity. Otherwise, if they dared to speak the name or title of those 3 heavenly venerates, a wisp of their awareness would descend. At that time, things would truly become troublesome. Forget about it. Let's obtain the source powers of heaven and earth first. Ling Han continued to advance. 3 days later, he obtained the 5th source power of heaven and earth, the heavenly sun black gold. However, it was a shame that he already had no need for this source power. He placed it inside the black tower, and this process made him involuntarily tense up. He was afraid of attracting the attention of those 3 old monsters. Alright, even if there are more source powers of heaven and earth that you can't use, you can't place them inside the black tower anymore. Even though there's a 90% chance that it won't be discovered, the more risks you take, the higher the chance of being discovered, Small Tower said in a solemn voice. It prevented Ling Han from taking any further risks. Ling Han pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. The Empress and Hu Niu could both obtain a source power of heaven and earth. In any case, They couldn't use a source power of heaven and earth to act as their divided soul anymore. As such, having one more or one less wouldn't make too much difference. There's still a source power of slaughter ahead. Chapter 21:18. Soaring Sword Qi. In the past, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have imagined that the source power of slaughter was actually a blade of grass. Slaughter is simply a type of regulation. It possesses no physical manifestation, so when the original source power of slaughter shattered, its power of regulations gathered on this blade of grass, allowing it to remain indestructible through several epochs. In other words, this blade of grass has already become the new source power of heaven and earth, Small Tower said. Ling Han looked at the blade of grass. It was only 3 inches tall, and it only had 4 leaves, each of which was emerald green and shaped like a sword. No matter how he looked at it, this didn't look like a peculiar blade of grass that possessed the source power of slaughter. Swoosh! A gust of mountain wind raced past, causing the leaves to slightly shudder. Blades of sword qi instantly formed before slashing into the void. A terrifying sight ensued. A fissure was brutally torn in the air, and the chaotic winds were forcefully dragged to a halt. The fissure was astonishingly large. Ling Han's eyes bulged in disbelief. This was the source power of slaughter, a source power that was filled with destruction and violence. Hurry up and absorb it. The Black Dragon King has left numerous formations in the surroundings, weakening the resistance of the source power of slaughter. If we leave it alone, she'll be able to absorb it within 100,000 years, Small Tower said in a solemn voice. Ling Han nodded in reply, and he hurriedly started to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This time, however, the indestructible Heaven Scroll surprisingly failed to work. The blade of grass remained unresponsive to Ling Han's approaches. What's going on? The regulation of slaughter hasn't been fused into the indestructible Heaven Scroll, Small Tower explained. By the looks of it, you'll have to come up with something by yourself. Ling Han was slightly disappointed by this result. However, a powerful urge quickly overtook him. If he could obtain this source power of slaughter with his own abilities, that would be the best acknowledgement of his power. To obtain a source power of heaven and earth as a dividing soul tier cultivator? Perhaps no one could achieve this. Even if they could, they would most likely require help from their elders. Ling Han released his thoughts to communicate with the blade of grass. The greatest difference between him and the Black Dragon King was a fundamental one. The Black Dragon King was now practicing the cultivation system of the foreign realm. In a fundamental sense, she no longer belonged to this realm. Thus, source powers of heaven and earth would also feel innate resistance and disgust toward her. They definitely wouldn't show intimacy toward her. Thus, the Black Dragon King had no option but to use formations which would slowly weaken the resistance of these source powers over time. Her abilities were astonishing, and add to that her 7th heaven cultivation, and it was entirely possible that she could succeed. Now that Ling Han had arrived, however, she had unwittingly paved the way for him. Indeed, Ling Han's cultivation was far inferior to that of the Black Dragon King. However, he was genuinely a being from the celestial realm. If the source power were forced to make a choice, would it choose a mortal enemy or an unfamiliar relative? Thus, Ling Han had faced few obstacles when obtaining the previous few source powers of heaven and earth. This was in part thanks to the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and in part thanks to the preparations made by the Black Dragon King. However, if the Black Dragon King learned of this, she certainly wouldn't take credit with a smile on her face. Instead, she would go wild with rage. Her hard work of tens of billions of years, it had all been stolen by a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. Thus, the difficulty of obtaining this source power of slaughter was also several times smaller than it should have been. Otherwise, a dividing soul tier cultivator daring to obtain the source power of slaughter? A single burst of sword chi would slash them into smithereens. Since this was the source power of slaughter, he would try to attract it with his fighting spirit. Ling Han unleashed his raging fighting spirit. This was an aura that wouldn't yield even before powerful enemies. So what if his opponent was Ji Wuming, the reincarnation of a 9th heaven celestial king? He was filled with fighting spirit, and he was brimming with confidence that he could one day defeat this opponent. He was burning with passion, and his fighting spirit became something tangible. Like sabers, like spears, like swords, and like fists, his fighting spirit roared like the drums of battle. After a long time, the blade of grass finally swayed slightly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Its 4 leaves shuddered, unleashing 4 bursts of powerful sword chi. Pang pang pang. A large portion of the mountain wall was instantly sliced off. Ling Han was astounded by this sight. He had personally witnessed the strength of this valley, yet the attack from the source power of slaughter made the mountain wall look like nothing but jelly. Its destructive power was absolutely terrifying. At the same time, this also made him feel even more enticed. He practiced the regulation of slaughter, but how could this compare to the source power of slaughter? If he obtained it, his battle prowess would rise by a significant amount. Ji Wuming. There was still a ball of unyielding passion in his heart. So what if he had reincarnated from a 9th heaven celestial king? As long as he put in the hard work, he could definitely overcome the gulf between them and defeat this opponent. Swoosh. The blade of grass continued to sway, sending bursts of sword chi into the surroundings. Some blade of sword chi scraped past Ling Han's face, only a hair away from cutting into him. However, Ling Han remained as still as a mountain. He didn't evade. In fact, it was fortunate that he remained unmoving. Otherwise, if he suddenly moved, it would perhaps result in him being struck by the bursts of powerful sword chi. With the terrifying power of the source power of slaughter, being struck by the sword chi would definitely obliterate his divine sense in an instant. Ling Han understood that this was a test from the source power of slaughter. It wanted to determine whether he was worth following. This was a good development. After all, if the source power didn't even want to test him, how could he hope to ever obtain it? He remained calm and composed, simply unleashing his blazing fighting spirit. He wanted to let the source power of slaughter know that if it followed him, it could battle to its heart's content. Even though the source power of slaughter was named as such, slaughter wasn't the main substance of this source power. Instead, it was battle. It would evolve through battle, and this evolution would allow it to slay elites. Boom! Ling Han's fighting spirit was unbounded and scorching, and it was almost about to condense into something tangible. In terms of fighting spirit alone, he was truly no inferior to any celestial king. This was an unyielding demeanor that he had developed as someone who had fought his way up from a small world. What did it matter even if his opponent were a heavenly venerate? Ling Han didn't fear them at all. He had the conviction and confidence that he could definitely defeat them in the future. The blade of grass started to sway more and more, filling the sky with blades of sword chi. It was as if it wanted to obliterate the entire valley. Brat, you dare? There was a shrill scream as a black dragon swooped over from the distance. Pang pang pang. It unleashed its might as it soared over, reducing the surrounding mountain walls into ashes. The Black Dragon King had come. The eternal celestial king had definitely been laid to a final rest, returning to ashes and dust. However, what about Xiao Gu? Ling Han couldn't help but feel anxious as he thought about this. He had always been caring toward his friends. Now that the Black Dragon King was charging over without Xiao Gu, he couldn't help but feel uneasy and worried for Xiao Gu. However, with the dire situation that he was in now, it was actually himself that he needed to worry about the most. The Black Dragon King was charging over. Wang! She made a slashing motion with her claw, and a colossal dragon claw bore down from the sky. To say nothing of one Ling Han, even tens of thousands of him would be killed by this attack. Was he going to fall at the final hurdle? Right at this moment, however, the blade of grass suddenly swayed slightly. Whoosh! A burst of brilliant sword chi slashed up at the dragon claw. Pooh! As the burst of sword chi slashed past, the colossal dragon claw was instantly sliced into 2. Ling Han was delighted upon seeing this. He hadn't imagined that the source power of slaughter would actually save him. Xiu! The blade of grass suddenly uprooted itself from the ground, revealing its roots that were less than 1 inch long. These roots were as clear as crystal, and they possessed some kind of indescribable beauty. The blade of grass shot toward Ling Han. Although it had blocked an attack of the Black Dragon King, that was because the Black Dragon King had unleashed the attack from extremely far away. Moreover, she also hadn't unleashed her full power. After all, did she need to unleash her full power to kill a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? For her next attack, however, the Black Dragon King would definitely unleash her full power. It would definitely be unblockable. The source power had still been hesitant at first, unsure of whether it should follow Ling Han or not. Now that it was being pressured by the Black Dragon King, however, it immediately abandoned its hesitation and directly leaped at Ling Han. "Brat, if you dare to absorb the source power of slaughter, I'll make you experience the worst torture imaginable," the Black Dragon King roared. A mighty celestial king was actually threatening a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? This was inconceivable, yet it was indeed happening at this moment. However, how could Ling Han pay any heed to her? He relaxed his body and awaited the arrival of the blade of grass. Xiao! The blade of grass vanished with a flash, fusing into Ling Han's forehead. Chapter 21:19. Way to leave. Damn! Damn! The Black Dragon King's fury incinerated the heavens, her killing intent blazing like an ocean. She sent out another palm strike at Ling Han. "Ya!" A familiar voice rang out. Xiaogu appeared, but this time, Xiaogu was no longer in human form, but rather was a bone that was diffused in celestial qi. Practically ignoring all rules of space, he appeared instantly in front of Ling Han. Boom! The Black Dragon King's strike descended. Xiaogu was instantly sent flying. If he was alone, he was considerably inferior to the Black Dragon King, and would not be qualified to block the Black Dragon King's strike. However, his original body was as tough as divine metal, and even after sustaining a blow from the Black Dragon King, he was still undamaged. A frightening storm of energy surged past. This was the furious blow venting the anger of a seventh heaven celestial king. Long black-colored energy was surging through the entire valley violently, and turning into an ocean. The power of regulation that did not belong to this realm was flaring, but because it could not achieve resonance and be replenished by the regulations of heaven and earth, it was already disappearing at an overwhelmingly fast rate. To the heaven and earth, this kind of energy, this kind of regulations was a disease. Thus, the body would heal itself as soon as possible, and erase this kind of energy and regulations. Where is he? Black Dragon King's figure descended, but there was no further trace of Ling Han in the valley. He has definitely not been crushed, but has rather hidden into a spatial god tools. She had seen very clearly. In the instant the storm of energy attacked him, Ling Han's figure had disappeared in a flash. In that case, he had to have entered into a spatial god tool. However, what kind of spatial god tool could remain unharmed after sustaining a blow from her? A celestial king tool? An expression of confusion appeared on her face. Wherever this brat is, I must find him. He actually retrieved 6 source powers of heaven and earth. There are only a total of 9 here. Damn it, he is really despicable. The Black Dragon King stomped her foot. She had thought that only the Eternal Celestial King and Xiaogu were her greatest foes. She had not imagined that the one to really stab her in the back was what was only an ant in her eyes. Don't let me find you, or I will let you know what hell on earth means. She swore harshly, her divine sense spreading out, and beginning to search for Ling Han all over the world. Could she find Ling Han? The answer was negative. It was not that the Black Tower's concealment ability was very strong, but rather that Ling Han was no longer on this mainland. After being struck by the Black Dragon King, the Black Tower had soared to the skies with all the other dirt and dust. Then, it was swept into the vacuum, and instantly blown away by the storm of energy. Very soon, it became unknown how far away it had been swept away. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han sprawled out on the ground, panting harshly. Just now, it had really been extremely dangerous. If it were not the source power of slaughter and Xiaogu having each blocking a blow for him, he probably would not have had any time to enter into the Black Tower. Too dangerous, he concluded. If he had to bet his life on the chances of having someone else save him, what if there came a day that no one came to save him? However, if I had not taken the risk at that time, I would not have been able to retrieve the source power of slaughter. There was no other alternative, he continued. I can still use rising from the ashes, and have the capital to die once. He laid down this matter first, and began to inspect himself. There were a total of 8 source powers. He was only 1 more source power away from the maximum limit of 9. It had seemed to be an incredibly difficult task to manifest 9 divided souls at dividing soul tier, and would possibly need an extensive time of tens of billions or hundreds of billions of years to accomplish, but he had not thought that he would be able to retrieve a total of 4 source powers of heaven and earth in one go. To be frank, I really have to thank that vicious bear gang leader. Additionally, for a daughter-in-law to bring so much good fortune even to her father-in-law, she would definitely bring even more good fortune to my son. This daughter-in-law definitely cannot be missed. Still, how am I supposed to leave? This was vacuum. The violent energy here could even destroy ascending origin tier elites. No matter how strong Ling Han's physique was, there was no way it had reached ascending origin tier. In that case, it would only be committing suicide if he left. Then what was he to do? Just stay inside the Black Tower, right until he cultivated all the way to Celestial King tier. That was impossible. To manifest his Earth Soul and Heaven Soul, he would have to go to a specific location. It was the same for Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier. If he stayed inside the Black Tower, he would only be stuck at Een Soul tier for his whole life, and then as time passed, he would be plagued by the Immortal's Tribulation. There would eventually come a day when the Immortal's Tribulation strengthened to an extent where his lifespan would be severed. Small Tower, is there any way out? Ling Han asked. There are two options, Small Tower answered in a very calm tone. There were actually as many as two options. Tell me about it. First, I let the Black Tower release its might, and it would naturally be a piece of cake to tear open a rip in space, and return to the Celestial Realm, Small Tower said. However, if that were to happen, those old monsters would definitely discover my existence. Ling Han sighed. Though this could immediately solve the problem, the new problem that would be caused seemed to be even more troublesome, so he could only skip this option. Then what's the second choice? You can use the source powers of the 5 elements to protect yourself, and would be able to resist the space storm for an extremely short time. Then you can use the great clash of source powers, and there is a chance that you can break out of this space, Small Tower said. Then that's decided. Ling Han did not want to waste any more time, and immediately sat down in a cross-legged position, beginning to deal with the source powers of heaven and earth inside his body. Firstly, it was a very migraine-inducing matter to have 8 different source powers to get along well. Each and every source power wanted to monopolize the world inside Ling Han's Dantian. This naturally needed Ling Han to play mediator. And it just so happened that all of them were bosses. If any one of them left Ling Han's main body, they would have the ability to kill him instantly. Thus, Ling Han could only harmonize them, and could not suppress them by force. This made him feel very depressed. Thankfully, he had dealt with all 8 of these source powers of heaven and earth within 7,000 years, and because time passed swiftly inside the Black Tower, he had actually only used 7 years in real time. Let's try out the defense of source powers first, Ling Han mumbled to himself. The 5 elements supported and subdued each other, and could cause a burst of terrifying destructive power. At the same time, they could also form a boundless defense through their mutual support. He began experimenting. Even if time passed at an accelerated pace inside the Black Tower, he had still used up what would equate to 4,000 years in real time to finally smoothen out the power of the 5 elements so that they could form Celestial King tier defense for a very short period of time. This time was so short that it was practically non-existent. In an actual battle, it would be too ineffective because when the attack of an elite shot over, it was impossible that it would surge over completely in a single instant. Then, what was the point of blocking the attack for an instant? However, it was of great help in solving his present dilemma because Ling Han could control when he would sustain the barrage of the storm in the vacuum. He was an outrageously bold man, and he rushed out of the Black Tower without the slightest hesitation. Boom! The violent storm of energy immediately assaulted him. With a bang, Ling Han immediately retreated back into the Black Tower. At least half of all the bones in his body were broken, his face as pale as paper. Almost half his life was gone. Fuck, the time it can be maintained is even shorter than I imagined. When I exited and came back in, I have still been grazed by the storm of energy, and almost died. Ling Han felt lingering fear. Even if he could use rising from the ashes, to revive in vacuum was actually just committing suicide again. No, I have to make it that the time it can be maintained would be extended just a bit more. For the sake of this bit of additional time, Ling Han spent another 3,000 years in real time. One attempt after another, and though he was still injured every time, the extent of his injuries was becoming lighter. Finally, one day, he did not suffer the slightest injury when he exited and re-entered. All right, now it's only the great clash of source powers. Time to see if it can tear a rip in vacuum. Chapter 2120. Opening the passage. Ling Han entered a long period of seclusion once more. Though he had mastered the great clash of source powers of 4 source powers, to have 5 source powers clash was not something as simple as just adding another into the equation. Instead, he had to form a relation of mutual interaction with the other 4 source powers. There were too many aspects that he had to attend to at the same time. In the process of his attempts, Ling Han killed himself another 3 times. Thankfully, he had learned his lesson. After each time he used Rising from the Ashes, he would wait until this ability recovered to continue testing out dangerous actions. He would not waste the other time, either. He was studying the 4 new source powers, and his battle prowess improved further. In fact, he had a feeling that he would be able to match Ji Wuming even without using the great clash of source powers. This was not impossible, because Ji Wuming also had a powerful move to burst his battle prowess. Ling Han was close to obtaining all 9 source powers of heaven and earth, and if this still did not allow his usual battle prowess to catch up to Ji Wuming's, it would really be too unjust. After all, a 9th heaven celestial king would also have to break the limits of his own cultivation level. It was only that he would be able to use more power of regulations. 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. Ling Han had finally completed cultivating the new great clash of source powers. He exited the Black Tower, and began to barrage the vacuum. Pang! He spread out the shield of source power, and then burst out with a frightening strike. Boom! When this landed on the vacuum, it was like a small pebble being tossed into a great river. The splash created was practically negligible. No, the power is too weak. Again. Ling Han continued his seclusion, and 70 years later, he made another attempt. There's some improvement, but still too weak. Again. The power's stronger again, but still considerably lacking. Again. 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 Another 3,000 years passed, and Ling Han had already forgotten the matter of leaving the vacuum. Instead, he had placed all his focus and energy on the matter of the great clash of source powers. The power of this secret technique had been developed to a brand new height at his hand. The clash of 4 source powers in the past was practically negligible compared to this. 5 elements perfected, not only could it match time, space and other regulations, it could even far surpass them. After all, this was 5 types of regulations of heaven and earth. Boom! Ling Han came out to barrage the vacuum as per usual, testing out the might of the great clash of source powers. He had not thought that a massive change would happen this time round. The vacuum split apart, and a passage was revealed. Ha! Ling Han was startled. This passage only appeared for an instant. His power was too weak. The space passage he created was too unstable, and could only be maintained for an instant. Success! Ling Han had already returned to the Black Tower. He had realized that he had successfully ripped open the void at this moment, and could return to the celestial realm. He laughed loudly, and then exited the Black Tower with a leap once more, and blasted out his strongest attack. The void split apart again, and a passage was revealed. Without the slightest hesitation, he rushed inside. Boom! His whole body shook madly, and he had not gotten his wits back yet when a bright sky appeared suddenly ahead of him. Bang! He dropped down from the skies, crashing heavily into the ground. He felt like even his internal organs were trembling wildly, and felt incredibly horrible. When he had entered into the vacuum, he had been protected by Lu Herong, but now he himself had traversed the vacuum. This kind of feeling was really too terrible. Deity! Demon? The voices of a few kids rang out in Ling Han's ear. He forced himself to open his eyes, and saw 4 small faces appear above him. They were all surveying him with great curiosity. When they saw Ling Han's eyes open, these 4 kids all got a shock, and hurriedly ducked their heads back in. Ling Han struggled to get to his feet. It was enough to experience this kind of feeling once. He had no wish to experience it a second time. He straightened up, and surveyed his surroundings. He was at the head of a small village. There was a massive path of limestone here, and in the middle there was a well, which was also built from limestone, and it actually had a soft luster to it just like limestone. Where is this place? Ling Han asked the 4 children. The 4 kids shook their heads simultaneously, staying very much on guard against him. Ling Han smiled, and took out some sweets from the Black Tower. With Hu Niu by his side, He definitely did not lack snacks. I will give this to whoever tells me. This is Great Wong Village. The 4 kids answered at the same time. Ling Han laughed loudly and split the sweets among the 4 children. Then he asked, "Do you know which heavenly realm this is?" The difficulty level of this question was slightly too high for the 4 children, and the 4 kids all shook their heads dumbly. What is the nearest city called? They still shook their heads. Forget it. He had best find it on his own. Hopefully, he had not been swept back into the Eastern Celestial Realm. This was not impossible. The vacuum and the Celestial Realm did not correspond to one another. It was possible that he entered from the Eastern Celestial Realm, and after traveling for a while and coming back out, he would have already arrived in the Western Celestial Realm. However, this kind of journey did not have any accuracy at all, and even a celestial king could not possibly traverse the void for a journey. Ling Han soothed his wildly trembling internal organs, and then leaped up, moving his limbs slightly. He felt like he was filled with explosive power. More than 10,000 years had passed in real time, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, more than 10 million years had passed. He had long since cultivated Ean's soul tier to the pinnacle. Thus, he decided to first break through to Earth Soul, and then head to the Rock Palace. He entered the village, and found some elders of the village to ask around. The adult men had all entered the mountains for hunting, while the women were gathering wild fruits in the woods. There were only elderly and children in this village until evening time. The nearest city here is called Great Cloud City, an old man said. I have been there in my youth. Young man, that really is a prosperous place. I really had an impulse not to return here years ago, but for the sake of my wife and kids, I still gritted my teeth and came back. Ling Han smiled slightly. Even if they did not cultivate, the people of the Celestial Realm had an extremely long lifespan. Usually it would be around 500 years, and this old man had been alive for more than 450 years, and had really reached the end of his years. But compared to Ling Han, the old man would only be the junior of a junior. Going by real time, Ling Han had been alive for more than 10,000 years, and added with the time acceleration's effects, he was already an old monster that had been alive for over 10 million years. Being called a young man by someone who had only been alive for over 450 years, Ling Han felt slightly amused. Without his knowing, he had already passed a very long time. If you're heading to Great Cloud City, you should head east after you exit the village. You have to walk a total of 3 years to be able to reach there, the old man continued, and then patted Ling Han's shoulder. Young man, you had best just settle down here. You look quite talented, so it would not be difficult to find a wife. Ling Han smiled, and drew out an alchemical pill, which he laid down. To him, it was not valuable, but for mortals, it was incredibly precious. It could reforge the old man's body, and from now on, he would be strong and healthy. It would be no difficult task to continue living for another 200 years. Actually, this was not an alchemical pill to increase one's lifespan, so its effects were not very good. However, for a mortal, this was already enough. Old man, take care. Ling Han stood up, and walked out of the old man's thatched cottage. He had just taken a step when he heard a powerful tremor sound from the earth. It was not an earthquake, but rather something created by some creature stomping on the ground. He paused slightly. Only a while later, he saw over a dozen handsome horses gallop over from the distance, directly barging into the village. These horses were not any mortal breed, but had a sliver of the bloodline of the dragon tribe. Their hooves were covered with dragon scales, and they appeared very majestic and mighty. When these horses barged in, their speed actually did not slow down. There were 2 children presently playing around in the middle of the path, and they were instantly scared silly. In just a moment, they would be run over. Chapter 21-21. Going to the Lu clan. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a groan. Though it was only a glance, he had seen very clearly that there were a total of 17 horses, and there was a person riding on every single horse. They were all men, and they all had a strong air of arrogance in their expressions. There's a kid standing in the path, and not only do you people not pull on the reins to stop the horses, you don't even slow down? Instantly, fury soared up in Ling Han. With a flash, he had already appeared in front of those 2 children, standing as proud as a mountain. Pang, 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 pang. These riders had absolutely no intention of pulling on the reins, and thus naturally crashed directly into him. When the first horse collided with him, how could it possibly send Ling Han flying? Instantly, the front hooves of the horse stumbled, and the back hooves soared, completely overturned from the crash. The horses behind could not brake in time at all, and crashed right into the horse in front of them. This caused a chain of horse accidents. In an instant, 7 horses had completely crashed into each other. Some had even broken their necks, twitching on the ground, and frothing at the mouths. Those 7 riders had naturally also fallen on the ground. However, they were all cultivators, so they immediately got back to their feet, though their expressions were slightly stunned. What was going on here? How had they been thrown off their horses? Whoa! The remaining 10 riders all pulled on the reins of their horses, turning their mounts around, and looking towards Ling Han. One of them demanded, "Who are you to actually dare block our path?" Ling Han ignored him completely, and only patted the heads of the 2 children. "It's fine now. Don't cry. Go and play." Those 2 children had completely no idea how dangerous the previous scene was. They had only gotten a bad scare. Crying, they ran to the side of the path. "Brat, 7th brother is talking to you." The rider from before raised his voice. He seemed to be the leader of the band of 17. The 7 people that had been thrown off their horses finally regained their wits, and all of them were furious. They had something very pressing and urgent, and could not afford to stop at all. Thus, even though they had clearly seen some children blocking their path, they had no plans to rein in their horses at all. However, they had not imagined that an elite would suddenly pop out of this tiny village, and throw their horses over. They all drew their weapons, glaring at Ling Han with eyes filled with killing intent. Ling Han crossed his arms behind him. These 17 people hadn't even entered the Soaring mundane tier, so it was naturally impossible that he would take them seriously. "7th brother, let's just kill him," a rider exclaimed. That 7th brother hesitated for a moment, but said, "We should prioritize our main task. Let's just give up those 7 cloud galloping horses. We'll just squeeze together, and set off immediately." "Brat, consider yourself lucky. If this had been any other time, you would have long since been chopped into several hundred pieces," these riders declared. The 7 people that had been thrown off their horses rode together with the others, getting ready to leave. "Wait." Ling Han stretched out his arms. "You plan to leave just like this? Those 2 kids have probably gotten psychological trauma from your scare, so don't you think you should leave some compensation? Fuck, who do you think you are? You think you are all that impressive just because we give you some leeway?" One of the riders abused him roundly. "7th brother, this brat is practically courting death. Let us just kill him." Some of the riders got restless, their vicious nature flaring. "All right." 7th brother thought for a moment before nodding. Since Ling Han was so determined to seek death, they could only oblige him. 5 riders immediately jumped off their horses, and then spread out, surrounding Ling Han. Though their words were very overbearing, they did not dare to underestimate Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had just used his body to forcibly stop the cloud galloping horse. This kind of strength was still quite powerful. Charge! They all brandished their respective weapons, charging to attack Ling Han. Chong, 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 chong. Ling Han did not dodge or evade, and these weapons naturally all slashed onto him. However, to say nothing of his physique, even the clothing he was wearing was woven from the fur of dividing soul-tier immortal beasts. How could it be penetrated by the power of a few Genesis tears? Not only did they not manage to pierce through, they were also bounced backwards. Pu. Immediately, 5 of their heads had been smashed by their own weapons. There were 2 that were more fortunate. One of their weapons had slashed into his left shoulder, and his whole person was practically about to be sliced apart, blood gushing forth madly. The other had been split apart from his lower abdomen, and had become 2 halves. At least they weren't dead. What? The remaining 12 were all green with shock. How could they have possibly imagined that there would actually be such a terrifying elite in such a tiny village of mortals? Though they themselves were shockingly weak as well. In the celestial realm, anyone that had not advanced into Soaring mundane tier definitely could not be considered any elite. Ling Han spread out his hands. "This has nothing to do with me." Indeed. He had not made any movement at all. It was only because these 5 people were too weak. The 12 men all looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at a demonic monster. They could feel their cheeks trembling, and those that were less brave were almost about to lose control over their bladders. Come, tell me what urgent matter you have that you cannot even concern yourself with 2 kids in your path? Ling Han's expression darkened. He was very furious. He knew that he could not take control of all injustices in this world, but since he had seen it, he would stretch out his hand and interfere. Those 12 men all exchanged looks, none daring to speak. Ling Han casually flicked a finger, and a streak of sword chi swept past. One of the riders was slashed in 2. His lower half was still seated on his horse, but his upper body had slowly slipped down, and landed with a crash on the ground. Still not speaking. I'll speak. I'll speak. A rider immediately screamed out shrilly, tears and snot pouring down his face. We are the servants of the Lu clan of Great Cloud City. Recently, we have sustained the joint attacks of the Kong clan, and are already in mortal peril. Hence, under the command of the clan leader, we are heading to Green Willow City to use the summoning formation there to contact a powerful force to ask them to send some people to solve our predicament. One person took the lead to break the silence, and the others naturally began trying to outdo one another and blurted out their replies, fearing that they would be killed by Ling Han if they did not speak. Oh, what level of forces are the Lu clan and Kong clan? And what is that great force? Ling Han asked carelessly. He had already lost interest, and planned to cripple the cultivation levels of these people to prevent them from causing further harm to others in the future. Our Lu clan and the Kong clan are both severing mundane tier clans, and because Kong clan has a grand elder that has broken through to the 4th severance, they have suddenly gotten the upper hand, causing our Lu clan to suffer repeated defeats. If we're talking about that great force, you would definitely be terrified to death. Imperial Void Sect. Ling Han faltered for a moment. Imperial Void. Is the sect master of the Imperial Void Sect the Imperial Void Celestial King? It is that lord precisely. Those 12 riders' expressions were all filled with manic excitement. In the celestial realm, celestial kings represented invincibility and absolute superiority. Ling Han was surprised. This was really a coincidence. To actually hear news of the Imperial Void Celestial King in this place. The ancestor of the Cheng clan, an 8th heaven celestial king, had been besieged by several celestial kings and left injured. Meanwhile, the Cheng clan was massacred by the Imperial Void Celestial King. If it had not been for the formation laid down by the celestial king of the Cheng clan, which had sent the ancestral grounds of the Cheng clan into the ancient realm, there wouldn't have been even a roof tile left behind. The large black dog had also said before that there was an unusual genius who had crippled his own cultivation level after he accomplished the 5th severance in the Severing Mundane tier. Then he had recultivated Severing Mundane tier from the beginning, and when he could achieve no further severance, he finally advanced to the Dividing Soul tier. This unusual genius was the Imperial Void Celestial King. Most importantly, the Imperial Void Celestial King had some link with the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Heavenly Venerate. A small Severing Mundane tier clan was actually linked with the Imperial Void Celestial King. Ling Han became very curious, and said, "Come, let's go to the Lu clan." Chapter 21-22. Do not trouble yourself on entertaining me. Go to the Lu clan. Why are you going to the Lu clan? Haven't you vented enough of your anger? Are you planning to commit mass killing at the Lu clan? Ling Han glared. If I tell you to lead the way, lead the way. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Never mind. He directly stretched out his hand, and lifted that 7th brother who was the leader. Then, he flicked out several streaks of energy, crippling the cultivation level of all the others. This was the punishment that he had sentenced them to for disregarding human life. Using regulations of space, his figure flashed and then reappeared, and he had already left millions and millions of miles behind him. He had obtained the spiritual void glass, and this source power of heaven and earth could allow him to possess innumerable doppelgangers in the vicinity of his body, as if countless mirrors had been placed. There would be thousands of images, and he could switch with any doppelganger he liked. In battle, this was incredibly practical. With millions of doppelgangers, who would be able to catch any trace of his real self, and deliver a fatal strike? On the other hand, he could attack through whichever doppelganger he liked, and there was practically no gap in his attacks. And added with a slight change, this could also be used in his movement technique. True body, manifested body, true body, manifested body. Continuously switching from one to the other, he could practically advance a great distance without wasting any time every time a switch was made, being even faster than lightning. If I added the regulations of lightning into the equation, could I become even faster? As Ling Han journeyed, he stroked his chin in thought. A normal person would have to travel for 3 years to complete the journey from this place to Great Cloud City, but to Ling Han, it was only a matter of 2 to 3 steps. He had not even finished a thought, and a majestic great city emerged before him. He stopped, and released his grip. Wah! Seventh brother immediately threw up, feeling like all his organs had been flipped and overturned to the point that they were about to rip out of his stomach. He was only in the Genesis tier, so how could his body sustain this kind of spatial movement? Yet Ling Han did not feel the slightest sympathy. A person like him who disregarded human life deserved it. He walked forwards, a thread of energy turning into a rope that bound seventh brother, dragging him with him. Halt! When they arrived outside the city gates, Ling Han was stopped by the guards. Entrance fee. A seventh brother. One of the guards saw seventh brother who was being towed around by Ling Han, and immediately got a shock. What seventh brother? Another guard looked towards seventh brother, his eyes flickering slightly. The Lu clan was a noble clan of Great Cloud City, and so was the Kong clan. These two clans had joint control of Great Cloud City, and that applied to the entrance fee for entering the city. The clans were in charge of 2 city gates, respectively, and this place was the city gate that was under the control of the Lu clan. However, a great conflict had recently erupted between the Lu clan and Kong clan, and the Kong clan was clearly enjoying the upper hand. It seemed like not only was the Lu clan going to be defeated, it was even possible that they would completely withdraw from Great Cloud City. Thus, these guards that were under the jurisdiction of the Lu clan naturally had other thoughts. Should they change sides to the Kong clan soon? Then, they only had to apprehend seventh brother, and if they delivered him to the Kong clan, then even if they could not get a great reward, it would be enough as a show of their stand. At the very least, seventh brother was also a centurion of the Lu clan's troops. However, they immediately discovered something off. That was because they saw that seventh brother seemed to be tied by an invisible rope. When Ling Han moved, he would move as well, like he was a dead pig being dragged around. Hiss, they could not trifle with him. They all shook their heads. To say nothing of snatching the hostage from Ling Han's hands, they did not even collect city entrance fees from him, respectfully escorting Ling Han into the city. After being guards for so many years, they had also acquired a considerable insight. There were some people that could not be trifled with. Ling Han naturally did not object, and asked seventh brother, which direction? There. Seventh brother had completely lost all temper, and pointed in a direction. Ling Han used the regulations of space and rapidly advanced. After about 15 minutes, he stopped. A town had appeared ahead in a small world. This could completely be considered a massive city, but in the celestial realm, this was only a small town. They had arrived at the Lu clan. However, there was a huge army surrounding the small town, and catapults were presently shooting out massive rocks that flew and blasted in the direction of the small town. Tong! The massive rocks had not even landed when a shield of light appeared above the small town and blocked them, and after every crash, the shield of light would tremble as multiple seals flickered. Clearly, the Lu clan was protected by a defense formation, and the Kong clan was using the most primitive method to unravel their defenses, exhausting all the energy of the formation. Ling Han only swept a passing glance and immediately understood. This formation was powered by human power, and at this moment, there were several hundred people that were inserting their origin power into this formation. A great many people had already paled, and they could not last much longer. Sight indeed could not take a turn, but divine sense was like mercury being poured onto the ground, and could be everywhere. Seventh brother was dumbfounded in shock. He had just left Lu clan 3 days ago, but in the blink of an eye, he had returned once more. Just how powerful was this man? Who are you? In the outer circle of the town, a member of the Kong clan discovered Ling Han, and immediately flew over in a leap, calling out towards him in loud rebuke. Someone here to watch the show. No need to trouble yourself to entertain me, Ling Han said with a smile, not even stopping in his advance. Entertain your head. Someone was more quick-tempered, and immediately pounced over, waving his saber at Ling Han. Sigh! Seventh brother released a soundless sigh, as if he could already see how this person would end. As expected, when the saber slashed onto Ling Han's body with a bang, not only had it not managed to pierce through Ling Han's defense, the force ricocheted back towards the attacker at an extraordinarily fast speed. With a PU, the latter's head was directly smashed into bits. Ling Han did not feel any sympathy. If this person had been more merciful, and had not used his full force, he should have been able to easily disperse this blow that had bounced back towards him. It was his own decision to leave no way out for others, which also announced his own death sentence. How dare you! An elite! The members of the Kong clan all exclaimed in shock, and after a momentary commotion, a person strode out. His face was square, and looked very dignified. This was a severing mundane tier, and he was only a third severance. However, everyone had a different destiny depending on their different origins. Some severing mundane tiers could only lower themselves to becoming thieves and gangsters, while there would be some that would be posing around, putting on airs greater than even ascending origin tier elites. Sir, the destruction of the Liu clan is already a foregone conclusion, so why do you have to touch this pool of troubled water? He asked calmly, his tone even. Only a Genesis tier had died, which naturally could not cause any stir of emotion in him. The other party had to be a severing mundane tier elite. If he was a fourth severance, and the Liu clan had two such elites, the matter would not be settled easily. Ling Han broke into a smile. I already said that you do not have to trouble yourself to entertain me. That's it. He waved a hand dismissively, and continued onwards. Hee. Then let me first take a measure of you, sir. That third severance Grand Elder moved, and grabbed at Ling Han's shoulder. If he could easily succeed, then he would kill Ling Han with the next blow. To dare to interfere in the matters of the Kong clan, the newcomer had to be tired of living. And if the other's strength was very powerful, no weaker than the elders, the latter would then advise the former to leave. After all, it was a very troublesome matter to be targeted by a severing mundane Grand Elder. Unless he had the certainty that he could kill him definitely, he could not be easily offended. The Kong clan was a big household, with innumerable clan members, and how many of them had attained severing mundane tier? Ling Han seemed to have completely failed to sense the approach of this blow. He did not stop moving, or even turn his head at all. You are seeking death. That third severance Grand Elder's killing intent instantly blazed. His hand was already less than an inch away from Ling Han's back. He had absolute certainty that he could kill Ling Han. Just die then. Without the slightest hesitation, he clawed out at Ling Han's back. Ah! A pained cry rang out. Chapter 21-23. Why have you come? Anyone would think that the person that had released this pained shout should be Ling Han, but the result had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. That third severance Grand Elder of the Kong clan was clasping his right wrist, his expression filled with agony. His blow had landed on Ling Han's back, yet it was as if he had struck divine metal. Furthermore, because he had intended to kill, he was both harsh and heavy in his assault, which had directly broken his 5 fingers by the force of the rebound. The nerves of the fingertips were linked with the heart, so it was naturally extremely painful. Ah! That third severance Grand Elder was screaming incredibly miserably, tears practically streaming down his cheeks. Ling Han turned his head slightly and asked, Are you all right? All right. Fuck all right, of course I am not all right. However, what that third severance Grand Elder felt even more was terror. The other man had not dodged or evaded, allowing the elder's attack to land solidly, but the result was that it was instead the elder whose finger bones had been broken. Just what kind of astonishing strength was this? My lord. He forcibly suppressed the pain, and greeted Ling Han respectfully. This junior is fine. Then what were you screaming for? Ling Han pretended to be surprised. This junior has lost his mind, that third severance Grand Elder hurriedly declared. Ling Han gave an "Oh. Then you should get some treatment." He extended a hand and pressed down. That third severance Grand Elder was instantly rendered into 7 or 8 pieces, but Ling Han had not dealt a fatal blow. Thus, if that third severance Grand Elder was pieced together, he could still rebuild himself, and continue living. But everyone, whether those outside or inside the town, was dumbfounded and gaping with shock. That was too strong, wasn't it? Fourth Severance Grand Elder. At least that, and he might even be a king tier among Fourth Severance powerhouses at that. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so powerful? In this instant, no one knew what kind of relation Ling Han had with the Lu clan, whether they were enemies or friends. Thus, the Lu clan side did not feel unburdened, while the Kong clan side did not dare continue their assault, either. All of a sudden, a silence had fallen. One person alone could decide the battle. This was the effect of an elite. Ling Han was unconcerned. He continued to drag seventh brother as he walked forwards, and very quickly, he had arrived in front of the small town. The defense formation was just a short distance ahead. On the city walls, an elder asked Ling Han, "Sir, are you friend or foe?" This was a fourth Severance Grand Elder, as well as the present clan leader of the Lu clan, Lu Huashan. Ling Han broke into a smile. "Now that you have a visitor, are you not going to invite me in?" On the city walls, the members of the Lu clan all began to shake their heads. He got to be kidding. Presently, they were still protected by the formation, but once they deactivated it, they would be like an exquisite beauty lying naked in front of a pervert. It would be too dangerous. Before finding out whether Ling Han was friend or foe, they would have to be extremely careful, and definitely could not afford to be careless. Ling Han sighed. "The way you treat guests is really too horrible. I want to file a complaint." "Sir, if you can help our Lu clan resolve the present predicament, you can ask for whatever you want," Lu Huashan declared, appearing to be very generous. There was no way he could not be generous. That was because under the powerful assault of the Kong clan, they could not last for long, and once the city was breached, all members of the Lu clan, young and old, would be killed. If they were dead, what would be the point of having wealth? Hee. If Sir could penetrate the city defenses of the Lu clan, then all the wealth of the Lu clan can be handed over to Sir. On the Kong clan side, an elder also stepped out. Though he was extremely far away, his voice was still clearly transmitted. This was the clan leader of the Kong clan, Kong Zhongjin. "Lord Clan Leader," the members of the Kong clan all exclaimed in shock. What, to actually hand over all the wealth of the Lu clan? Then wouldn't the Kong clan have gone to so much trouble for nothing? Yet Kong Zhongjin waved a dismissive hand. These juniors really were short-sighted. The true wealth of the Lu clan lay in their mines and herb gardens. Ling Han could not move these, and even if Kong Zhongjin had presently gotten the upper hand, they would still have to pay a very great price if they wanted to eliminate the Lu clan. Though his words were very generous, he was merely being generous with the wealth of others. "Sir!" Lu Huashan called out loudly. "Sir!" Kong Zhongjin also shouted loudly. Now, Ling Han was a variable. His strength was unfathomable, so everyone wanted to snatch him to their side. Who knew? The scales of victory could tilt in favor of one side just because he leaned towards them. Ling Han shook his head and said, "If you are not willing to invite me in, I can only enter by myself." He raised a hand and pressed down. Wang, a wall of light immediately appeared out of thin air, seals of great Tao flickering. Ling Han stretched out a finger and flicked. Wang, the wall of light trembled slightly like a ripple rising on the surface of water, crystalline waves rising up. "What is he doing?" someone asked curiously. "He can't be planning to break through the formation by force, right? That is practically a delusion. This is the Dhara subduing formation, capable of stopping even Heaven's soul elites. If that hadn't been the case, we would have long since broken through. We can only use our own formation to break through this formation, and use war machines to slowly wear away at the power of the members of Lu clan, so that the great formation would lose its source of power. Though he is very strong, if he can really break through the formation, I will swallow this rock." The members of the Kong clan whispered among themselves, and so did the members of the Lu clan. However, they were even more confident, and thought that as long as there was someone maintaining the formation, then this great formation could never be penetrated. "Sir, you don't have to waste your time. There is no possible way you can penetrate the formation," Lu Huashan stated calmly. Ling Han smiled faintly, and channeled the regulation of slaughter. He delivered a stroke of his finger. Pa! The shield of light trembled slightly, and immediately shattered like crystal, turning into countless pieces of crystal that reflected dazzling light. "Pooh, Everyone spluttered simultaneously. The formation had really been broken through, and it had only been by a finger at that. What kind of force was this? It was too terrifying and astonishing. However, Ling Han did not take advantage of the opening and enter. Thus, the shield of light was reformed very soon, and enshrouded the town once more. After all, Ling Han had not destroyed the formation, and merely broken through the formation shield by force. It was like how a person penetrated the defenses of his opponent in a battle between cultivators. But the question of whether he would inflict injury on his opponent would depend on whether he continued to follow up on his assault. Ling Han channeled the regulations of lightning again, and a purple seal immediately appeared in the palm of his hand, flickering with electricity. He stretched out his hand and pressed down lightly on the shield of light. Z, the lightning immediately shot out from the palm of his hand, instantly covering the entire shield of light. Pa, the shield of light crumbled immediately, falling in pieces accompanied by the light of electricity. The formation had again been broken. Pooh, everyone was once again gaping with open mouths and bulging eyes. He had broken through the formation again, and it was using another method at that. Ling Han still did not take a step. Hence, the shield of light recovered once more. In high spirits, he tried the regulations of space again. With a flash of his figure, he had directly appeared on the other side of the shield of light. Everyone responded, air. Then, he used the 9 heavens flame, Shenin source water, firm essence green gold, and so on. In short, he had used every single one of the 8 source powers of heaven and earth once, and he could easily break through that defense formation each and every time. Everyone was already shocked to numbness. Their mouths twitched madly, yet they could not spit out a single word. This is not very fun. Ling Han shook his head, and finally strode into the small town. Retreat, retreat, Kong Zhongjin said in a quivering voice. This man was terrifyingly powerful, and Kong Zhongjin had actually intended on bargaining with him. He had really been outrageously bold. The members of the Kong clan were already trembling in fear, scared witless. Now that they had gotten the command from their Grand Elder, they instantly turned around and fled in panic, fearing that Ling Han would suddenly change his mind, and say he wanted to pay a visit to the Kong clan or something. And my lord, the members of the Lu clan could not flee. They could only get off from the city walls, and knelt down to make their salutations to Ling Han. Lu Huashan was the clan leader, after all. Gathering his courage, he asked, "Dare I ask, my lord, why you have come?" You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.